A young man and his girlfriend enter the apartment they share. She tosses her keys on the entryway table as the man checks the time on his phone. He reminds the young woman that they will need to leave soon if they don't want to miss the movie they have purchased tickets for. The woman agrees, but she wants to take a quick shower before they leave. As she goes to freshen up, the man sits down at his computer to get in a quick round or two of his favorite online squad-based first-person shooter. He puts on his headset and jumps into a game. Before he knows it, he's just finished his third round. He checks the time on his phone again and realizes that they were running late. He takes off his headphones and is confused when he hears what sounds like the shower still running. He gets up and goes to the bathroom door and listens. The shower is definitely still on. The man knocks on the door and asks if everything is all right. He waits a moment, but there's no response. He knocks again, and still, nothing. She doesn't usually take showers this long, and he immediately worries that she might have passed out or, well, he doesn't even want to think about it. "I'm coming in, okay?" he announces as he opens the door to check on her. The man immediately notices how steamy the room is. The hot water must have been running for a while, and he's worried she really did pass out from the heat. "What's going on? Are you okay?" he asks, and when there's no response again, he pulls open the shower curtain to find nothing. Just an empty tub. There's no sign of his girlfriend anywhere. The man is beyond confused. He turns off the water and goes to the bedroom, but she isn't in there either. He runs to the front door, but it's still locked, and her keys are sitting on the table. He unlocks the door and sticks his head out into the hallway anyway, but nothing is out there. What is going on? He checks the bedroom again, then the bathroom, but she hasn't suddenly reappeared in either. He's in complete shock, unsure of what could be happening. He sits down on the toilet and puts his head in his hands. His head is spinning as it feels like the world is suddenly falling down all around him. The police are immediately suspicious of the man's story. His girlfriend simply vanished while taking a shower? "You expect us to believe that?" the detective asks. The man has no answer, though. It's as if she simply blinked out of existence. He's convinced she must still be in the building somewhere, that she somehow slipped out without him noticing. But none of the security footage from inside the building shows anything abnormal. There's footage from the cameras in the lobby of them entering the building, but nothing after that of her leaving. Just as in every missing person case like this, the boyfriend is the #1 suspect. But without any evidence, they can't hold him any longer. After many long hours of interviews, they finally allow him to leave, but not back to the apartment, since it's an active crime scene. The man has no family to speak of, and his few friends seem to have the same suspicions as the police and want nothing to do with him. His girlfriend was the only person he truly had in the world, and now she's gone. He's put up in a shabby motel, and days pass, then weeks, then months, but no evidence of the missing woman ever turns up. The man replays the memory of that day over and over in his head, searching for some kind of answer, but try as he might, he can't remember anything helpful. No clue as to what could have happened. The case is completely cold, and has been from the very start. The police eventually have to move on to newer, more solvable cases, and they finally allow the man to return home. He's overwhelmed with emotion the first time he enters the apartment. The place is a mess. It looks like the police turned it inside out looking for clues. Not knowing what else to do, he starts the long process of cleaning up the apartment. After hours of putting things away, he eventually gathers the strength to go to the one room he's been avoiding, the bathroom. He opens the door to the last place he's certain his girlfriend was. He enters to find that it looks like the rest of the apartment, as if someone has looked at every single object. But just like him, the police never found any trace of where she went. After straightening up this last room, he decides that he should take a shower and go to bed. It fills him with dread to think about standing in the last place he knows where she was. But he's had months to grieve the loss of his girlfriend, and he's decided that he needs to move on, whatever that means when someone goes missing without a trace. He turns on the shower and lets the water heat up before stepping in. Once he's in, every thought he has is about her. He wonders if she ever actually got in the shower at all, or somehow used it as a diversion to slip out unseen. He just can't figure out how. The day's events race through his mind, just as they have 1,000 times before, but his thoughts are interrupted when he notices that the water has started to pool around his feet. He looks down and sees that the drain cover looks normal. Maybe there's a clog, though. Do showers clog when they're not used? He has no idea. He bends down to get a closer look. The long, black creature emerges from the drain in the blink of an eye and latches onto his mouth, muffling him before he even has a chance to scream. He struggles and pulls down the curtain on top of him as he falls back onto the shower floor, but it's already too late. and in a matter of minutes, he too will be gone without a trace. Is there anything more comforting after a hard day than a nice, long, hot shower? The answer to that is no, there is nothing better. But that relaxing shower might just be the last you ever take when, unbeknownst to you, your pipes are home to an instance of SCP-153, also known as drain worms. SCP-153 refers to a species that resembles the common nematode, or roundworm, consisting of a long, thin body with a large mouth on one end. While some roundworms can grow to as large as a meter long, which is in itself a disturbing thought, SCP-153 instances can be much, much larger, and it is estimated that they can reach up to nearly 10 meters in length, though it is hypothesized that some instances in the wild may grow even longer. These worm-like creatures will feed off of any available organic material. However, their favorite form of sustenance is fresh animal tissue, and they appear to have an especially strong predilection towards human flesh. In order to satiate their desire to feed on their preferred prey, SCP-153 has developed a rather unique predatory style that perfectly suits its elongated body structure. While it is unknown just where they originate, they are most often found in the pipes of sewer and drainage systems. 153 instances will swim up those pipes, seeking out ones that lead to people's homes, and especially those that connect to showers and bathtubs. Once they reach the end of the pipe, SCP-153 will latch onto the drain cover and begin secreting an acidic substance. The acid quickly dissolves the drain cover, and SCP-153 will position its own mouth in its place, which it then is able to camouflage as the missing drain cover almost perfectly. Once SCP-153 has taken this position, it is virtually impossible to distinguish it from the original or discern that anything has changed. SCP-153 will then lie in wait until it detects that someone has entered the shower or bathtub. Once the unsuspecting person has begun to bathe, it will very quickly emerge from the drain, latching onto the victim's face, most likely in order to prevent them from calling for help. It then begins to rapidly secrete more of the same acid that it used to dissolve the drain cover. With how effectively it was able to dissolve metal, it's no surprise that SCP-153 is able to quickly produce the same effect on its victim. Their skin, muscle, and bone will all be almost immediately liquefied, allowing SCP-153 to feed on the slurry. And the drain worms feed extremely quickly as well. After just several minutes, basically nothing will remain of the person who stepped into the shower, and 153 will retreat back into the drain, leaving no signs that it was ever there, save for the missing drain cover. The SCP Foundation became aware of this anomaly following multiple mysterious missing person cases that all had one key element in common. Each was reported as having disappeared after entering a bathroom to either shower or take a bath. The Foundation soon discovered that large populations of SCP-153 instances were living in the sewers beneath several major American cities, and immediately began enacting containment procedures. The Foundation collected as many specimens as they could, and brought them to Bioresearch Area 12, where they keep them contained in 10 by 10 by 5 meter tanks that are kept partially filled with sewage and other organic material for them to feed on. Of course, it is of the utmost importance that these containers are never connected to any other plumbing systems, either internal or external. With several specimens contained, the Foundation began researching the creatures in order to hopefully better understand them and how they were able to develop such complex hunting techniques. Research was also approved to find out whether they could be used as a sort of waste disposal system in certain extreme circumstances, such as with SCP-2717, a mass of living animal tissue that has grown to line nearly 4 kilometers of sewer pipes beneath Amsterdam. A small number of SCP-153 instances were approved for release into the wild in order to test whether they could stall the spread of 2717. However, this experiment was halted following some disturbing new reports. More missing person reports came to the Foundation's attention that bore the hallmarks of an SCP-153 attack, but these new reports were not limited to people who vanished after bathing. It now appears that SCP-153 has further adapted and has begun to emerge not just from showers and bathtub drains, but now also from sinks and, yes, even toilets. The Foundation is unaware of just how many instances of SCP-153 continue to exist in the wild, but there's no doubt that many continue to live and hunt undetected in sewers around the world. This anomaly, which has been classified as Euclid, is taken very seriously by the Foundation, and any reports of people who go missing from bathrooms are immediately investigated for signs of SCP-153. Field agents are to be equipped with infrared and ultraviolet sensors which can bypass SCP-153's camouflage, and if specimens are able to be captured alive, then they are to be brought to Area 12 for further research. But don't bother worrying too much the next time you step into the tub. If you've been targeted by SCP-153, there's not much you'll be able to do anyway, and your worries will soon be going down the drain, along with whatever remains of you. A violent storm rocks a merchant ship back and forth. Huge waves roll over the deck and threaten to capsize the vessel. A merchant sailor grips the railing, trying with all his might not to be thrown overboard. With a loud twang, a cable snaps loose. A hand suddenly grabs his shoulder. He turns around with affright to see that it's one of his shipmates. He points towards the bow of the ship and yells over the roar of the storm that they need to try and repair it. The two men make their way to the front of the ship, and the sailor starts working to fix the broken cable. He looks up to see that his mate is no longer working. He's staring straight past him, and there's fear in his eyes. The sailor turns around to see a massive tentacle sticking out of the sea. The huge appendage is mind-boggling in its size. He can only stand there, marveling at it, until it begins violently smashing against the deck. The sailor dives out of the way just before the tentacle crashes down right where he was standing, where his crewmate was still locked in fear. The ship is in chaos as more tentacles appear and slam the deck over and over. One cracks the deck right next to him, sending him flying. He comes to moments later in a wreckage pile. Nothing else has changed, though. Whatever this monster is, it's not stopping its assault on the ship. The sailor stands up and picks up a sharpened piece of wood from the pile he was lying in. He runs over to the nearest tentacle and thrusts the sharpened stick into its flesh. There's a mighty roar from the sea, and the tentacles stop their onslaught. They go limp before sliding into the sea. The sailor looks around at the carnage that's been wrought. Dead bodies and debris litter the deck. He moves to check on his crewmates, when right in front of him, bursting from the sea, is the head of the biggest squid he has ever seen. A massive beast that must be 1,000 meters long. Whatever he had seen before of this creature was truly just the tip of the iceberg. With another roar, the creature lifts up out of the water and wraps its arms around the ship. The sailor only has time to duck down and close his eyes before the entire ship is pulled down beneath the waves. With a gasp, the sailor breaks the surface, screaming and gulping for air. He's alone now, treading water in the middle of the ocean during a storm, but not for long. The squid reappears, its head slowly rising out of the water just in front of him. Its head, the size of a house, has two giant, uncaring black eyes that seem to both see him and not. It extends a tentacle toward him as it leans back in the water, exposing its huge beaked mouth. It wraps its powerful arms around him and starts to pull him towards it, when suddenly, there's an explosion. The squid has been struck by something. Both the sailor and the creature turn to see the most incredible thing. A battleship is coming towards them, slowly rising out of the ocean as if it were somehow submerged, and it's firing on the creature. The squid drops him and starts heading towards the ship. This is going to be a battle for the ages. While this sailor had no idea what he was witnessing, the SCP Foundation was all too familiar. This was yet another incident of SCP-2846, also known as the Squid and the Sailor. But first, a quick personal request from me. I need your help to spread the word about the lesser-known anomalies in the SCP Foundation's archives. The best thing you can do to help me is subscribe, turn on notifications, and then go tell your friends to do the same. This is a huge help and will let me bring you more and more SCP anomalies. Now back to our file. SCP-2846 is the name given to a set of phenomena that occur in the Gulf Atlantic region. These phenomena consist of interactions between two entities, known as SCP-2846-A and SCP-2846-B. 2846-A is a gigantic, aquatic creature that resembles a cephalopod, though no similar organism has been discovered that is even close to approaching its size, with estimates placing 2846-A at being at least 950 meters in length. This creature appears in areas of deep water during storms and will attack civilian vessels, especially cruise ships and merchant vessels. These attacks are sporadic and follow no known patterns other than that they take place during inclement weather. They are sudden and without warning, and will nearly always result in the complete destruction of the targeted vessel if they're not intercepted. Attempting to stop these attacks is SCP-2846-B, a large seafaring vessel that in its current form resembles a Pennsylvania-class super dreadnought battleship, though it appears hazy in photos and videos, as if translucent, and eyewitness observers have described the ship as looking vaporous. Just like SCP-2846-A, this ship will appear from deep water, surfacing near the site of a 2846-A event. The vessel will fire on the creature, drawing its attention, and the two will then engage in a heated battle. The two will continue fighting until SCP-2846-A is rendered immobile or completely incapacitated, after which it will sink down into the sea. Following its victory, the ship too will then submerge and disappear beneath the waves. SCP-2846-A is believed to have existed for thousands of years, and maybe even older than that. The creature's existence was first recorded in an Icelandic saga from the 13th century, but the Foundation's first documented sighting came in 1905, when an agent working for the Foundation, one Admiral Reginald von Allen, spotted the creature surfacing with a whale wrapped effortlessly in its tentacles. Soon after spotting it, a ship of the line surfaced as well to do battle with the creature. The Admiral tried to signal the crew that he could see on the deck of the ship, but the vessel descended back below the surface before any communication could take place. In 1935, the mysterious ship appeared again, near the SCPS Hildegard, and this time, the anomalous vessel was the one to initiate communication. Some of the crew of the ship, designated as SCP-2846-B1 through B915, came aboard the Foundation ship and engaged in a conversation with Captain Levy Hansen. SCP-2846-B1 identified himself as David Thomas Jones of the Royal Navy, and went on to explain that their ship had been sunk by a monster resembling SCP-2846-A over 300 years in the past. He described how after sinking into the darkness of the sea, he awoke on a mysterious shore where he met with a woman who referred to herself as Calypso, the goddess of the sea. She explained how she had sealed the leviathans that prowled the depths of the ocean in a pit, but that over time, the seal she had placed on it had begun to weaken. A titan had escaped and taken the form of the most deadly creature in the sea, the Kraken. Calypso feared that the creature would attempt to further destroy the seal and release its monstrous brethren, a disaster that would result in the end of all human life. She requested that Jones pursue the creature along with his crew for as long as needed, and in return, they would be granted immortality. Jones agreed, and his endless battle against the anomaly began that day. The reason he had now come aboard a Foundation ship was directly related to this task. SCP-2846-A had grown more powerful over the years, larger and bolder too. He and his men couldn't die, but many more would if they were no longer able to subdue the beast. He needed something from the SCP Foundation. He needed a bigger boat. Following this conversation, and seeing the value in allowing Jones and his crew to continue their mission, the Foundation commandeered a newly built Pennsylvania-class super dreadnought battleship from the U.S. Navy, the USS Montana. The ship was sunk 15 kilometers from a Foundation naval facility in Cuba. 30 hours later, the ship surfaced from the sea, though it was now more heavily armed than the USS Montana had been. As part of the agreement, SCP-2846-B was fitted with an explosive device that is capable of completely destroying the ship should the crew for some reason ever turn their guns on Foundation or other human targets. In 2013, an important discovery was made after a tracker was attached to SCP-2846-A. Deep in the Atlantic, roughly 1,300 nautical miles west of Florida, a depression in the ocean floor with a large iron object on top of it was found. 2846 seems to return to this site over and over, where it has been observed clearing the rocks from the area. And it appears that it is almost finished with its task. The iron plate on top of the depression is nearly exposed. It's not known exactly what's underneath, but whatever it is, it's hot. Very hot, with temperatures near it measured at over 4,000 degrees Celsius. It's feared that whatever the creature is trying to unearth, it would lead to an XK end-of-the-world scenario, and it is imperative that it not be allowed to do so. And there's more bad news when it comes to SCP-2846. In 2014, the Foundation ship SCPS Pristine was pursuing a large underwater organism assumed to be SCP-2846-A, and signaled to 2846-B to surface and dispatch the creature in what had become the normal operating procedure. Something strange happened, though, and the Pristine was suddenly struck by a mysterious force. As SCP-2846-B began to engage with the now surfaced 2846-A, the crew of the Pristine reported seeing numerous eyes appearing and disappearing in the water below the ship. They had never seen anything like it. The ship was struck again, as satellite images spotted an enormous entity directly beneath the ship. The Pristine began taking on water, and the crew was forced to abandon ship. 2 other SCP ships in the area fired on the strange, many-eyed entity, causing it to once again disappear into the depths of the ocean, as SCP-2846-B banished 2846-A to the ocean once again. Due to the ongoing danger of SCP-2846-A, it has been classified as Keter. In the event of an appearance, Mobile Task Force Tau-11, also known as the Can Openers, who are stationed aboard the SCPS Nikolai, are to utilize a special transmission device to signal the crew of SCP-2846-B and maintain contact with them throughout their engagement with the creature. Tau-11's primary mission is to minimize civilian exposure to the anomaly, and any non-Foundation ships that come in contact with either 2846 entity are to be moved from the area, and all aboard the craft are to be given Class C amnestics. The SCPS Nikolai's captain has been given permission to fire on SCP-2846-A to assist in the fight, and should 2846-B turn hostile for any reason, the explosive device on board is to be detonated. It is still unknown just what the entity that attacked and destroyed the SCPS Pristine was, but the ease with which it dispensed of the vessel has many in the Foundation worried that SCP-2846-A has already been able to release one of its brethren from its prison, and at this point, stopping them may no longer be an option.
What was that? The man and woman's hike through a gently rolling portion of the Rocky Mountains has just taken a turn for the dangerous. There's something there in the bush, the man tells her before stepping in front of her in a defensive pose. They watch the bush intently. There's a slight rustling of the leaves as if something is inside. The man picks up a stick from the ground and holds it in front of him, ready to strike whatever fearsome beast is lurking in the underbrush. The rustling stops, but the man doesn't move from his protective stance. "Do you think it's gone?" the woman asks. The man isn't sure. He leans in towards the bush, searching for signs of what might be hiding inside when... Ah! The man screams and falls backwards as the creature emerges from the bush. "Aw!" the woman cries. "It's a pika!" She kneels down to get a closer look at the adorable little creature. Pikas are native to this part of Colorado, and they resemble rabbits but with small, rounded ears. She watches it hop back off the trail before turning around to see her friend lying tangled in the branches of a tree. She can't help but laugh as she offers a hand to help pull him out of his predicament. "Are you all right?" she asks between fits of laughter. Yes, he's fine. The only thing hurt was his pride. He notices a small red spot on his arm and rubs it, but it doesn't seem to hurt at all. His attention is diverted by the woman, though, who is marveling at the tree he was just stuck in. Free of the branches, he can appreciate now that the tree really is incredible. It looked like a huge blue spruce, but the name is a complete misnomer, because this tree is a vibrant red color. "I've never seen anything like it," she says, and the man hasn't either. Neither knows what species it is, and, strangely, there don't seem to be any others like it. Maybe this is the result of an odd genetic defect that turns blue spruces red. After admiring the tree for a moment, the pair decides that they've hiked far enough and that they should probably head back to the car. She jokes that he's likely exhausted from his run-in with a wild animal, and he laughs, but clearly his ego has been bruised. The man stops his car in front of the woman's house, and she thanks him for taking her on the hike. As she starts to get out, though, he stops her. He asks if she wants to go do something else, like dinner? The woman thanks him for his offer, but she has to be up early the next day for work. Just a quick drink then? An hour? 30 minutes? The woman tries her best to let her friend down easy, explaining that she likes him as a friend and as only that. The man opens his mouth to respond, but she stops him. If he valued their friendship, then he wouldn't try to take advantage of it by using it as a backdoor to dating her. The man again looks like his pride has been shattered. He apologizes and admits that she is right. It's just that he has such a good time with her that he never wants it to end. She gives him a sad smile as she closes the car door, and he watches her enter her house before he finally drives away. It's 2 weeks later when the man's phone rings. It's his friend. She explains that she's been thinking a lot about what he said in the car and that she likes spending time with him too. Maybe there could be something more to their relationship. The man can't believe it. Is this really happening? The woman is serious. She'd like to take him up on that dinner offer, if he's still interested. Her treat. She wants to know what he is doing right. Ah! The man suddenly yelps in pain. Is he okay? What was that sound? Yes, I'm fine. It was nothing, the man tells her. It's just that now's not a good time. The woman doesn't understand. She thought he'd want to see her. She explains that she's leaving town for a work trip the next day and will be gone for a couple of weeks. She was hoping she could see him before she left, but the man cries out in pain again. He tells her that he hasn't been feeling well all day, but that he'll be all right. Okay, well, get well soon. I'll call you when I get back. They exchange goodbyes, and the man hangs up the phone. The man looks terrible. His skin is pale, and his face looks hollow and gaunt. He looks down at his arm and sees that the veins themselves appear to be moving, pulsing, and vibrating. He screams again in agony and falls to the floor, clutching his arm. After writhing on the floor, he manages to summon the strength to reach for the phone. His hand searches on the table above him, and eventually he's able to knock it onto the floor. He grabs the phone and starts to dial 911. Before he can press 1 again, another wave of intense searing pain consumes him. Several weeks later, the woman is standing outside the man's house. Mail and newspapers are piled up on his front porch, as if no one has been in or out in some time. She knocks on the door, but there's no response. Hello? She calls out, but still nothing. She's very worried. She's tried calling him several times, but he never answered or returned her messages. She tries the doorknob, and to her surprise, the front door swings open. She steps inside and the room is dark. She's also immediately hit by a strong aroma of pine? She searches on the wall and finds the switch. She turns on the lights and can't believe what she sees standing in front of her. There in the middle of the room is a massive spruce tree, its upper branches pressing against the ceiling. She reaches out and touches the tree's vivid red branches. They feel sticky and wet. She pulls her hand away and looks down to see that it's covered in a red substance. That's when she notices something else. Stuck among the trunk at the base of the tree is the half-consumed body of her friend. Unfortunately, this pair would never have the opportunity to see their feelings take root and grow, because unbeknownst to them, this beautiful tree is actually a very deadly anomaly, known to the SCP Foundation as SCP-867, but which is perhaps better known by its very appropriate nickname, Blood Spruce. SCP-867 is, or at least appears to be, quite similar to the species of tree Pisceae pungens, better known as the blue spruce. Of course, there are a number of dramatic differences between 867 and its non-anomalous counterpart. Visually, and most obvious, is the coloration. While blue spruces, as the name implies, are typically a blue-green color, SCP-867 is a deep, vibrant red. There's another major visual difference too, with the blood spruce lacking any sort of seed cones that you would normally expect to find. With no pine cones to protect and spread seeds, you'd be right to ask how SCP-867 goes about reproducing. The answer to that question is what makes this beautiful tree such a dangerous anomaly. The secret to how SCP-867 reproduces is found in its leaves. While they look like pine needles, SCP-867's leaves are, in fact, needles. Their structure is very similar to that of hypodermic needles, and each one contains a single long, thin seed, which sits above a small gas pocket at the base. When a living creature touches the leaves, the tree immediately reacts. It triggers the gas pocket in the base of the leaf to release, which injects the seed into the skin of whatever touched it. The process is quite similar to that found in auto-injectors, like those used to quickly treat allergic reactions. The seed itself is extremely small and is coated in a liquid that has both anesthetic and coagulant properties, which makes the process virtually undetectable. Once implanted in the skin, these seeds can lay dormant for up to 2 weeks before they begin the germination process, and the true horror of SCP-867 is revealed. Once the seeds begin to sprout and grow, they will not seek to penetrate through the skin like a plant rising out of the soil. Instead, the strange plant will grow within its host's body, spreading throughout the circulatory system. This process is extremely painful for the host. The plant's tendrils wind through their veins and capillary system, stretching and pressing against them as the blood spruce grows within them. Eventually, the ever-increasing size of the plant's tendrils becomes too much, and the veins will begin to rupture. This leads to severe internal bleeding, and soon after, the death of the host. The entire process is quite quick, with it only taking 24 hours from when the seeds first sprout to the host dying. But that single day will feel like an eternity to the afflicted individual as they feel the plant rapidly growing inside of their body. But even though the host has expired, this parasitoid tree is far from finished with them, or at least their body. Soon after death, a new instance of the blood spruce will burst from the body. The red tree is quite small at first, but it will continue to quickly grow, just as it did within its host's body, and can reach maturity in just 30 days. And unlike most other plants, SCP-867 is able to grow regardless of light or soil conditions, because it does not produce food via photosynthesis. No, this plant is carnivorous. As it grows, the 867 will slowly consume its host's body until nothing remains except the blood-red tree. Instances of SCP-867 were first identified in Colorado during the 1990s, following reports of numerous disappearances of hikers and park rangers. The SCP Foundation dispatched a team to the area to investigate, and they soon discovered numerous instances of the previously unidentified tree. Several still young specimens were acquired, though unfortunately, this led to the deaths of several agents who were not yet aware of just how dangerous the red spruces could be. Once their threat level was properly assessed, several specimens were flagged for containment and research purposes, while all of the other identified instances still in the wild were destroyed. The remaining instances of SCP-867 were classified as Euclid and are now securely kept at a Foundation biocontainment site. Direct human contact with the plants is normally not allowed, and remote rovers are used for the majority of tests and upkeep. If for any reason it is necessary for a human to enter 867's containment cell, they are to wear full hazmat suits with a Kevlar underlayer, and upon exiting the cell, must undergo a full herbicidal treatment and inspection. Should any possible puncture marks be discovered, they will be forced to quarantine for no less than 15 days. Ah, nature. It's so beautiful, peaceful, and calming, yet seems determined to try and kill us in any number of ways. If you're out hiking or camping in the woods, try to remember this extremely famous adage which I may or may not have just made up. It goes, "Leaves of 3, let them be. Needles of red, well, you're probably already dead." 3 SCP Foundation agents stand before a large warehouse. Their mission is simple. Enter the building, find the observation unit that has gone missing inside, recover the data from it, and leave. It should be easy, but the rundown structure they're standing in front of is no ordinary building. This is SCP-015. The leader of the group, a large, muscled man who goes by the codename of Agent 6, slides open a large door on the front of the warehouse, and immediately the whole group is struck by a sight that makes them reconsider just how easy this mission is going to be. In front of them is not a wide-open warehouse floor, but a cramped tunnel leading deeper into the building. The group has a job to do, though, and so the 3 head inside, Agent 2 first, followed by Agent Lon, the data specialist, and finally, Agent 6, the expedition leader in the rear. As they enter the narrow hall of pipes, the light from their flashlights plays off the floor, walls, and ceiling. Flashlights are one of the only items allowed in SCP-015, and they reveal what the researchers had told them in their briefing, that many of the pipes aren't made of standard materials, but instead are all sorts of strange substances like wood, glass, or even bone. The odd series of pipes have formed a twisting tunnel leading deeper into the warehouse. The group must be careful, since the floor is uneven, with pipes occasionally sticking up out of the floor like tree roots, ready to trip the unobservant. The 3 follow the corridors of pipes along the path that they each had to memorize. As they come to branching paths, Agent 2 speaks the series of turns they must take aloud. Left, left, right, left, right, right again, straight, right, and so on as they go deeper and deeper. They'd have to follow the directions exactly if they hope to reach the place where the modular robotic vehicle should be. Left, straight, straight again, right. Just a couple more turns and they'd reach the point where the MRV had sent its last signal before going offline. As they walk, though, they find that some of the passageways are getting more difficult to pass. The pipes have closed in at certain points, choking the already small tunnels down to mere crawlways. At one particularly narrow point, the group must get down on their bellies and pull themselves along the ground. After Lon and 2 exit the tight passage, Agent 6 suddenly calls out to the 2 agents ahead of him. "What is it? What's wrong?" 2 asks. "I'm stuck," comes the response from 6. Lon and 2 grab 6's arms and begin pulling. With a loud grunt from all of them, 6 finally comes free.
His pant leg is shredded from the thorny wood that one of the pipes in the narrow tunnel is made from, but he's free, and they can continue on. Finally, after what seemed like an hour of walking, they finally find it. The modular robotic vehicle that had been sent in to investigate the current state of SCP-015. There's something very strange about the robot's condition, though. It looks like it has been speared right through its primary observation unit. A smooth black pipe that appeared to be made of dark fabric had pierced the vehicle right through its camera, but the lens didn't appear broken. Instead, it looked as if the pipe had somehow connected with it, docking inside the lens housing as if the two parts were made for each other. Other pipes had protruded from the floors and walls as well, snaking into open spots on the vehicle and lifting it up a foot off the ground. They looked over the robot, which was held helpless in the air, its wheels slowly spinning as its internal battery ran down. The agents walked around the MRV, examining it, looking confused about the fate that had befallen it. 6 suddenly broke the silence. "Well, what are you waiting for?" Lon wasn't sure what to do, though. As she got closer to the robot, she noticed that a foul-smelling substance was dripping from the pipe that had merged with the camera. Her job was to remove the data from the MRV, but they also had strict orders not to damage anything in SCP-015. So what was she to do about the robot? Wasn't it technically a part of SCP-015 now? She was worried that if she removed the data cards, then SCP-015 might... Well, she didn't know exactly. 6 didn't buy it, though. The researchers may have told them that 015 reacts, but he could see now that it's just a bunch of weird pipes. Maybe it grows or moves a bit, but how would it even know they were there? It hadn't shown any signs of sentience, let alone sapience. He wasn't going to hang around in here any longer than he had to, though, and if Lon wouldn't get on with it, then he would. 6 moves to the MRV and flips open the data cover on its side. More of the fetid liquid pours out, but he ignores it. Lon and 2 both look at each other. Did the other hear that too? It sounded like steam venting from somewhere deep inside SCP-015. 6 doesn't seem to have heard it, and begins to remove the thin data cards from the MRV. With the data now recovered, he decides to see if he could free the vehicle from the pipes. It wasn't necessarily a mission objective, but why let good Foundation property go to waste when it's right here in front of them? 6 pulls first at the MRV, then the pipes that were running into it, but he can't get it to move. It's completely stuck, seemingly fused to the pipes. "Come on, we've got the data, let's get out of here," 2 says. But 6 isn't done trying. He sets his flashlight down and uses both hands, pushing against the wall of pipes with his foot to gain additional leverage, when suddenly, there's a creaking sound. "Ha! I think I got it." But 6 was mistaken. It wasn't the sound of the MRV coming free that he had heard, but the sound of the floor underneath him giving way. 6 falls into the floor up to his armpits, and the other 2 agents rush to help him. But as they do, they notice the glow and immediate burst of heat coming from the hole. Thickly flowing molten glass begins to fill the hole, and Agent 6 cries for help as they desperately try to pull him free. His cries turn into screams of desperation as they each grab an arm and, after a struggle, finally manage to free him and drag him from the hole. 6 is no longer screaming as he is pulled free, though. His eyes and mouth are locked wide in sheer panic. Lon is now the one who starts to scream, as she realizes that they have pulled only the top half of Agent 6 from the hole above the fiery pit. The bottom half of his body is completely gone, burned away by the heat of the liquid glass. There's no time to be shocked, though, because pipes begin to hiss and ping all around them. A wooden pipe above 2 and Lon suddenly bursts, sending a cloud of dust flying into their faces. It's powdered glass, and it starts to pour out of the broken pipe, covering what's left of 6 completely. 2 spits out a thick stream of blood, his mouth shredded from the glass particles, as Lon desperately tries not to rub them deeper into the cuts in her eyes. They both know they can't stay here, though. They have to run. The pipes are deafening as they move as quickly as they can back the way they came. It sounds like a train is barreling through the building. They're surrounded by chaos. Boiling chemicals pour out of one pipe. Tiny slicing rose thorns spray out of another. They come to a crawlway that's just a couple feet wide, but it's their only way forward, and they have no choice but to enter. 2 dives in and starts crawling. Lon is hesitant, but a blast of steam from a pipe near her head convinces her she has no choice, and she follows after him. 2 wriggles through the narrow passage and is surrounded by more sounds of pipes creaking all around him. Each one seems like it might burst and pour who knows what deadly substance onto him. But he has to suppress his fear and keep moving forward. Finally, he emerges into a wider hallway. He turns and looks back at the hole. Lon should have been right behind him, but there's no sign of her. He sticks his head back in and calls for her. There's no response, but he can hear her still in there, somewhere in the dark, struggling. He has to help her. 2 gets back into the passage and starts crawling. She couldn't have been that far behind him, probably just around the next turn. But as he crawls around the bend, there's nothing there, just another wall of pipes. The passage has been sealed up. It's a dead end. He presses his ear to the wall and can hear Lon screaming on the other side. He hits his flashlight against the pipes in anger. The pipe shakes for a moment, then bursts, spraying out a black liquid that covers his hand. It's some kind of corrosive acid, and he screams as it burns through his gloves to the flesh beneath. He quickly crawls backwards out of the narrow tunnel and emerges back out into the wider passage. Chu cradles his hand, trying not to look at the exposed bone. "I'm sorry," he cries as he runs through the tunnel of pipes towards what he hopes is the exit. "I'll get help. I'll come back, I swear." Lon can't hear his promises, though. She heard what she thought was a pipe burst followed by Chu's cries, but she doesn't know now if he's dead or alive. She decides she has no choice but to go back the way she came. Maybe there's another way out. But after moving just a few inches, her feet touch a solid wall. She's trapped in a space no bigger than a coffin. She feels around, but there's nothing here in the dark. Nothing at all. Just smooth, fuzzy, warm pipes. No, wait. There is something. A gap in the ceiling. But it's just the open end of another pipe. And now, there's something dripping out of it. Droplets of whatever the substance is land on her face, and then a full stream of liquid pours out onto her. She coughs as it gets into her mouth, but then realizes that it's sweet. It's honey? At least it wasn't molten glass or deadly acid. Maybe she could even survive for a time on the liquid until another expedition team came to rescue her. Her brief moment of hope is cut short when she realizes that the pipe isn't stopping and that she's already lying in an inch-deep pool of honey. Lon beats on the walls and ceiling as the honey continues to rise around her and screams for help. She tries to plug the pipe with her fingers, but it's no use. Nothing can stop more and more of it from pouring out. The honey continues to rise around her, and all she can do is scream and claw at the pipes that have created her tomb. She presses her lips to the ceiling in an attempt to gain one last breath before the honey completely fills the space. Her final choking gasps are sickly and sweet as the honey fills her lungs. Agent 2 keeps running through the tunnel of pipes. His hand no longer hurts, at least, either from the shock or from the fact that all the nerve endings had been burned away. The horrible sounds coming from the pipes seem to have stopped too. Maybe he really would make it out of this alive. Lon might have found another way out too. There's no telling how many routes through this maze of pipes exist. He would probably exit the building to find her outside waiting for him. Poor Agent 6, though. He never had a chance after opening that cover on the MRV. His thoughts are abruptly interrupted, though, when his foot catches on an unseen pipe and he falls forward onto the floor. Or rather, he should have fallen on the floor. Instead, a pit opens up in the ground, leading to a steep, sloping floor of pipes. He screams and tries to stop himself, but the slick liquid covering everything makes it impossible for him to slow his descent, and he begins to slide down the pipes. His dimming flashlight shows what seemed to be an endless tunnel of pipes stretching down into the dark. The tube of pipes twisted this way and that, slamming him into the walls on either side, tumbling him head over feet. And the descent never seemed to end. He screamed until his voice went hoarse, then gave out entirely. He didn't have any way to mark the passage of time, other than when his flashlight finally started to flicker and then dim, before finally dying. He slid down the endless tunnel of pipes for what felt like days in the darkness, far deeper than they physically should have been able to go. When the friction of the pipes began to tear his skin away, it was almost welcome. At least there would finally be an end. Following the loss of the SCP-015 recovery team, the data on the modular robotic vehicle was deemed non-vital, and no further expeditions were authorized in order to try and recover it. SCP-015 is a mass of pipes, vents, boilers, and other various plumbing apparatuses that have completely filled an otherwise nondescript warehouse located in a major American city. Anytime the warehouse is not being directly observed, the pipes will begin to grow, filling nearly all of the available space in the building, but also trying to connect to other nearby structures through the sewer and other subterranean infrastructure systems. The current best estimate of Foundation researchers is that the building contains over 190 kilometers of pipes, which range from just 2.5 centimeters to over 1 meter in diameter. While some of these pipes will look new, others have the appearance of being rusted or damaged, with many showing signs of leaking. The pipes are made of a strange assortment of materials as well, including bone, wood, steel, pressed ash, human flesh, glass, and granite. Oddly, no pipes composed of lead, PVC plastic, copper, or any other material one would normally expect to be used for the production of pipes have been found. But by far the strangest anomalous quality of SCP-015 is that it appears to react to aggressors. Should the building detect that the personnel inside of it are carrying tools, or if they make any attempt to either damage or repair any of its pipes, they will trigger an immediate reaction. Pipes near the offending subject will often burst, spraying them with a variety of liquids that have included oil, mercury, rats, a species of insect not yet identified, ground glass, seawater, entrails, and molten iron. More and more pipes will continue to burst around the subject until they either retreat from SCP-015 or are killed. SCP-015 was discovered by the Foundation after reports that pipes emanating from a warehouse had mysteriously started to connect to multiple other nearby structures, with no obvious answer for how or why they had suddenly begun emerging from the structure. The pipes were eventually able to be cut back and are now solely within the warehouse once again, but the human cost of containing SCP-015 has been high, and so far, 11 SCP personnel have been killed in their interactions with the anomaly, and an additional 20 are still missing. All of the missing are presumed to also be dead, though there have been reports of banging and screaming coming from within the building that may indicate they are still alive in some form. SCP-015 has been classified as Euclid, and because the building itself is impossible to move, it has been effectively contained on site. The Foundation maintains a gap of at least 2 meters around the warehouse, and no structures are allowed to be built that make contact with the building's outer walls. Should any protrusions from SCP-015 be detected, the pipes are to be immediately capped and sealed. Internal exploration of SCP-015 is permitted with approval from senior staff, but following numerous losses within the site, expedition teams must consist of 3 members, all of whom are equipped with safety lines and GPS tracking. The teams are not allowed to bring any hand or power tools within the building, nor are they to attempt any repairs or maintenance of any kind while inside. There's no need to enforce these rules, though, seeing as SCP-015 appears more than happy to terminate the offenders itself. The SCP Foundation contains many anomalous locations, though SCP-015 may just be one of the strangest. A storm rages outside of the little old house, as inside, a little old woman bounces a little baby on her little old knee. The baby coos and laughs as the old woman makes funny faces and noises for the child, trying to keep it entertained as they wait for his parents to return from their much-needed night out by themselves. The old woman herself needs a rest now, though. She's forgotten how exhausting it can be to watch a child. "Okay, that's enough. It's time for both of us to take a little nap before your parents get back." She gets up and takes the baby into a nearby room that looks as though it was a nursery at one time, but it hasn't been used for many years. As she goes to set the child into the crib, a strong gust of wind blows through the room. She places the baby down and rushes to the window and closes it shut. It must have been left cracked open by mistake. Brr, the room is cold from the wind, but she has just the thing to fix that. She moves to a small closet and opens the creaky door. The little old woman strains to reach up to the top shelf and feels around. Ah, there it is. She pulls down a baby blanket, a soft baby blue with colorful animals printed on it. It looks as though it's been up there for a long time, and she gives it a good shake before walking back to the crib. "Look what we have here. It's your daddy's own blankie." She gives it another shake. "There we go, good as new." She leans into the crib and wraps the small helpless child in the blanket before giving him a gentle kiss on the forehead. "Now you get some sleep. Your mommy and daddy will be back before you know it, and we want to show them what a good babysitter Grammy is, don't we? That way I get to see you all the time." The little old woman switches off the light and exits the room, leaving the door cracked just a few inches. She heads back to the couch and plops down on it. Almost as soon as she does, though, the baby starts crying. With a sigh, she gets back up and goes back to the nursery. "What's the matter, little dear?" she says as she turns the lights on. "Oh no," she rushes to the crib. "You've kicked your blanket off. You must be freezing." She grabs the blanket from the end of the crib and tucks it around the baby once again. "There you go, that's better." The old woman leaves the room and quietly closes the door shut, leaving it open just a few inches. The moment she turns around to go back to the couch, though, the crying starts again. With a sigh, she opens the door and goes back into the room. Once again, the blanket is stuffed at the end of the crib where the baby has kicked it off. Fine, don't want a blanket? That's fine. She picks the baby up out of the crib and rocks him in her arms until it stops crying. She sets him back in the crib. There you go. No blankets, just please get some sleep. Grammy's tired. The old woman takes the blanket out of the crib and leaves the room. She closes the door most of the way and, incredibly, this time the child remains silent. The old woman resumes her place on the couch and starts to yawn. Just as she does, the wind outside picks up and howls loudly. The old woman shivers. She looks next to her and spots the baby blanket. She picks it up and examines the cute animal print, remembering when her own son was a baby wrapped in it. She smiles at the happy thought and throws the blanket around her shoulders. She leans back on the couch and finds that her eyes are growing very heavy. She'll rest them for just a moment. She won't fall asleep. She'll just rest. Mom, it's us. We're back. Thanks again for... The couple both scream when they enter the house to find that the old woman is lying face down on the floor in a pool of blood. The source of the blood is obvious. Chunks of flesh from her shoulders and upper back have been torn out, leaving jagged holes, as if she were mauled by an animal. As the man runs to the old woman, trying to do anything he can to help her, the woman runs to the nursery to find that the baby is sleeping peacefully in his crib. The woman picks up the child, tears streaming down her cheeks, and returns to the living room to see her husband kneeling beside his dead mother. Both the husband and wife are so shocked by what they have found that neither notices the baby blanket lying on the couch, or that the cruel, blood-covered mouth on it is slowly fading from view until it disappears completely. There is little in life that is more comforting than a favorite blanket. Perhaps you've had the same one since you were a child, or you have a heavy one that you like to wrap yourself in when you're feeling down, or maybe it's just one that's especially fluffy and warm that you'd do anything to keep. Today's anomaly plays on those very feelings, using them against its victims to become one of the more insidious predatory anomalies in the SCP Foundation archives. This is SCP-799, also known as the Carnivorous Blanket. SCP-799 is a type of creature that can vary in shape, size, and appearance, but, as the name implies, always takes the form of a blanket of some kind. The exact material the anomaly is made out of is unknown, but it is a very soft fiber that in many ways resembles a high-quality merino wool blend, though one that retains heat even more effectively than its natural counterpart. SCP-799's weight can vary from between half a kilogram all the way to 6 kilograms, and while examples have been found in nearly every color imaginable, it seems predisposed towards pastels and will frequently have patterns featuring stylized, friendly depictions of various animals. Both the pastel colors and the childish patterns are especially common in instances of SCP-799 that weigh less than 2 kilograms and would colloquially be known as baby blankets. While SCP-799 is undoubtedly a living organism, there is some debate as to whether it is itself an animal or perhaps a type of fungal colony. Instances of 799 are incapable of locomotion, lying motionless for long periods of time, and require little in the way of nutrition. What small amount they do need, they appear to be able to gain almost entirely from the organic particles present in normal household dust, such as animal dander and dead human skin cells. The blanket feeds via a series of minute, filter-feeding mouth-like structures that are spread across the surface of the creature, which wait for nutrients to fall into them, not unlike a sponge on the ocean floor. Instances of SCP-799 can survive for quite a while in this state, and one specimen was noted as having lived for multiple years in a damp attic, subsisting entirely on the small organic particles that would drift down from the rafters above. Should an instance of SCP-799 be forced to go for long periods of time without a source of nutrition, though, like when, for example, it is placed inside of a sealed closet or drawer, it will begin to undergo certain physical changes, which result in it metamorphosing into its predatory form. These changes aren't noticeable from only casual observation and consist of the blanket converting its many filter-feeding mouths into a single, large one that is lined with multiple rows of extremely sharp teeth. The blanket creature also develops a new form of tissue inside its cloth-like structure, one that is similar to muscle and capable of contracting and squeezing. Once its metamorphosis is complete, the instance of SCP-799 will lie in wait for an unsuspecting creature to cover themselves with it or wrap it around their body. Once they do, the blanket will bide its time until they enter a state of rest, usually waiting for them to fall asleep entirely, at which point its feeding phase will begin. Once the creature has detected that its victim is dormant, it will use its newly formed muscle to latch onto them, holding them in place as it opens its tooth-lined maw. It will begin to bite at its confined prey, tearing off several kilograms of flesh,
bone, and any other organic material it can, swallowing it and converting it into a thin slurry that it spreads through its body almost immediately. This traumatic, violent process nearly always leads to the victim dying of blood loss. Within 10 minutes of the attack, the mouth on SCP-799 will have been completely reabsorbed, leaving no signs that it is anything other than a normal, everyday blanket, though one which now mysteriously weighs several kilograms more than it did before. By 40 minutes after the attack, the entire digestive system within SCP-799 will have demetamorphosed back into its original form, with a single digestive tract being changed once again to the many dispersed filter-feeding mouths. While SCP-799 is more than happy to feed on any warm-blooded animal, including humans, it shows no interest in cold-blooded ones or inanimate objects. It appears then that its senses may be limited to only touch and heat, using those as signs that it is now wrapped around a potential meal. Adding to the strangeness of SCP-799 is that it reproduces through budding, like flatworms and corals. When it has absorbed enough nutrients and sufficiently increased its mass, either very slowly through filter feeding or rapidly via its carnivorous phase, it will begin to take on a quilt-like appearance. Over several weeks, one of the quilt squares will puff up and slide off the blanket. This new, smaller instance will resemble a doily or a throw pillow, until it too begins to feed and grow. The new instance is a perfect clone of its parent, identical in every way, and it will eventually grow to a similar size and begin its own reproductive cycle. It is unknown exactly how long it takes SCP-799 to reach full maturity, but the current best guess is that when kept in its filter-feeding phase, an instance will reproduce every 50 to 60 years. Instances of SCP-799 are quite prevalent across the planet, and the SCP Foundation currently has hundreds of examples in containment. Unfortunately, it is unknown just how many still exist in the wild, as it is very difficult to identify instances, with one of the only reliable means being through genetic testing. Should any instances be located, though, they are to be destroyed immediately, as the Foundation already has a large enough population in containment for research purposes, and they pose too much of a risk both in terms of harm and exposure to the general public. SCP-799 has been classified as Euclid, and each instance is kept in its own separate biocontainment cell at Biosite 66. Dust is regularly collected from the on-site D-Class personnel dorms and is sprinkled over the blankets regularly to keep them in their filter-feeding state, though only just enough to hopefully maintain their size and not allow them to reproduce. Should any small cloth objects appear in their containment lockers, it is to be removed immediately and contained separately. SCP-799 isn't the only predatory creature that resembles a cloth good in Foundation containment, and research into possible connections to SCP-1626, the oversized gray-hooded sweatshirt that sends penetrating fibers into anyone unlucky enough to put it on, is ongoing.
A man is lying in a hospital bed, and it is clear that he is not doing well. A group of doctors buzz around him performing various tests, checking his vital signs again and again. The man feels weak and a little disoriented, and the looks on the various doctors' faces tells him all he needs to know. Something is very wrong with him. Finally, there is a break in the commotion, and the doctors stop prodding at him and peering into his eyes with a bright, blinding light. All of the doctors and nurses leave the room except for one. The doctor steps towards the man and tells him that he has some bad news. You see, before the doctor can finish, someone else emerges from the shadows in the corner of the room and taps him on the shoulder. I'll handle this. The man hadn't noticed this person, but he can see now that he's dressed in a suit, and unlike the doctors, he doesn't have any identifying items like a name tag or badge. Maybe he's some kind of professor, or a renowned surgeon who is going to tell him how they will make him better. The doctor steps back from the bed, but the man in the suit tells the doctor that it would be best if he and the patient could be left alone. Just for a moment, of course. The doctor nods in agreement and leaves the room. The man in the suit waits until the door is closed behind him to continue. He tells the sick man that he has a rare condition, quite rare. So rare, in fact, that you're the only person to ever have it, the only recorded case in history. The man in the suit sits down on the bed next to the man and takes his hand, lifting it up, examining it. The man's hand is an odd color. It has a slight green tint to it, and the skin itself appears to be taking on a fibrous quality. The sick man feels very tired, but he manages to whisper, "Are you a doctor? Are you going to help me?" The man in the suit responds, "Yes, I'm a doctor. Of sorts. A doctor and a researcher. I work for a very important organization, and I specialize in cases just like yours. Well, not exactly like yours. You're unique. Quite special, in fact." The sick man offers a weak smile. I'm very lucky. Oh yes, very lucky indeed. Well, not because of your condition, of course, but because I am here. You see, if it's all right with you, we'd like for you to come with us, to come stay at one of our facilities for a while. We can't promise that we'll be able to figure out exactly what's happening or why. But if we can, we have a much better chance of figuring out how to cure it. To cure you, so you can go back to a normal life. Do I have much of a choice? The sick man asks. Of course you do. It's completely up to you. I think this would be your best course of action, your best by far in fact, but we can't force you to do anything you don't want to do. The sick man looks down at his greenish hand again, turning it over in front of his face, examining the small growths that seem to be sprouting from his skin. When do we leave? Right now, the man in the suit tells him. The nurses will come get you ready, and then we'll be on our way. The man in the suit leaves the room and closes the door behind him. Standing next to the door in the hallway are a pair of men wearing tactical uniforms like a SWAT team. The man in the suit tells them that luckily they won't be needed today. This one is coming easy. The sick man lies on a bed, but now he is in a new room. This one is even more sterile than the hospital, with cold concrete walls and harsh fluorescent lights. Just like in the hospital, he's surrounded by a seemingly never-ending cast of doctors, nurses, and researchers. They too poke and prod at him, take samples, and administer all kinds of tests. As time goes on, the man's condition only grows worse. It seems there's nothing that they can do to stop his condition from advancing. The green color spreads across his body, and his skin soon becomes woody and stiff. If he sits in one place for too long without moving, tiny fibers emerge from his skin, like probing roots looking for soil. All the while, the man grows weaker and more fragile. Even the slightest movement seems to cause him great pain. The doctor who originally brought the man to the facility gathers with a small group in the observation room next to the man's containment cell. They discuss the results of a recent test, which showed that much of the melanin in his skin has somehow been replaced with chlorophyll, and that the fibrous quality of his skin is being caused by the appearance of cellulose around his cells. In other words, he isn't just starting to look like a plant. He's truly becoming a plant, and there doesn't seem to be anything they can do to stop it. Try as they might, they haven't found a single clue as to what is causing the man's condition, or how to treat it. The man, though, seems strangely at peace with his fate. He's told that they're going to allow him to live, whether that be as a man or as a plant in containment, for as long as he can stay alive, and that he will be well taken care of to make the whole process as comfortable for him as possible. Even though they failed to find a cure for his anomalous disease, they will do everything in their power to make sure he doesn't suffer. A tragic yet familiar tale for the SCP Foundation. A normal person is subjected to an abnormal situation that completely changes their life, and not for the better. At least in this situation, the Foundation appears to have shown a rare glimpse of their own humanity, opting to make this safe class anomaly's existence as painless as possible, rather than force it to endure a lifetime of painful tests and studies. Or at least that's what you've been led to believe. Unfortunately, everything you've just seen about SCP-1500 is a lie. Those with Level 3 clearance, though, can learn the truth, which is that SCP-1500 is actually an extremely dangerous anomaly, whose true identity must be hidden from even the majority of the Foundation, for reasons you'll soon learn. SCP-1500 is not a man suffering from a condition that causes him to slowly transform into a plant-like being, but is actually a greenish-gray, smooth-skinned humanoid with no facial features at all. Its limbs are long and multi-jointed, and its abdomen is highly distended. The skin is exceptionally durable and tough, and though SCP-1500 has no visible sense organs like ears or a nose, it still appears to possess senses that are roughly equivalent to an average human's. The entity is incapable of speech, owing to its lack of a mouth, and it has not shown a need to eat, breathe, or sleep at all. In addition to the strange appearance of SCP-1500, its primary anomalous effect is the impact it has on any human that comes within its line of sight, or rather what would be its line of sight if it had any eyes. Those that do find that they will soon begin experiencing headaches, nausea, and an overwhelming sense of dread. These symptoms will increase over the next several minutes, with the headaches becoming more and more debilitating, and the feelings of nausea and fear growing until eventually the subject passes out. They will remain unconscious for roughly 15 seconds, after which they will awaken and claim to have no memory of ever being exposed to SCP-1500. But something else strange also happens to the subject after waking. When asked to describe the creature known as SCP-1500, they will no longer remark on its faceless head or long twisted limbs. Instead, they will describe the creature as being an average-looking Caucasian male. Even stranger is that to them, it now has a name, Zachary Callahan. In further interviews with subjects exposed to SCP-1500, it became clear that many of their memories had been reshaped to now include the entity in its human-looking Zachary Callahan form. They would often describe him as a close friend from childhood or early adulthood, and one that played a significant role in their lives. They also claim that they are perfectly capable of communicating with Zachary Callahan, able to carry on conversations with him, while all the observing researchers will see is an apparently one-sided conversation between the subject and the featureless gray-skinned creature. While Foundation personnel have found that they are able to remove the false memories from the subject's minds through the use of amnestics, they have yet to be able to reverse the effect that causes the subject to see SCP-1500 as a human being, and everyone who has been exposed continues to see the entity as Zachary Callahan forevermore. It is still unknown what kind of long-term effects this exposure may have, or how dangerous to their mental or physical health it will turn out to be. Even more concerning is that evidence has emerged that SCP-1500 may be able to affect more than just those in its immediate presence. Recently, a United States senator was giving a televised speech on a rather uninteresting topic. The speech started out normal enough, but then the senator began to relay an anecdote about a childhood fishing trip he had taken with a friend. You won't be surprised to learn that according to the senator, the friend's name was none other than Zachary Callahan. Investigations into the senator's background concluded that there was no person by that name of the appropriate age in the area where he grew up. It was also discovered the senator had suffered an especially bad migraine at a dinner party the week before the speech. Further research into SCP-1500's memory-altering effects have also revealed that they might just be more intrusive than first believed. Rather than simply appearing as an old friend, subjects exposed to 1500 have begun to report that Zachary Callahan actually played a much more prominent role in their lives, either as a close relative, a parental figure, or even a former lover. In each of these cases, the subjects described their feelings for Zachary Callahan as ones of adoration, and that he made them feel protected and loved. Most troubling of all is a recent addendum to the SCP-1500 file, which describes the very latest research on the anomaly and its effects. It is now estimated that as many as 23,000 people all across the world have been affected by the creature, with the idea of Zachary Callahan implanted into their memories. It is unknown why it is trying to spread its influence so far and wide, but one clue that may point to a nefarious purpose is that it seems to be disproportionately targeting political and military figures, as well as SCP Foundation personnel. Following these new developments, classification of SCP-1500 to Keter was requested and granted. Due to the risk that SCP-1500 poses through its anomalous effects, and its powerful ability to influence those in positions of great power, it is permanently kept in a modified humanoid containment cell at Site-17. No personnel are allowed to enter into its containment chamber under any circumstances, nor are there security cameras in its cell. A false containment document describing a human male with an anomalous plant-like effect was placed in the database in order to deter further investigation into the real SCP-1500. And any personnel who experience painful, persistent headaches are immediately transferred away from Site-17, while any who attempt to breach containment are immediately terminated. Is SCP-1500 planting the seeds for something big by infiltrating the minds of some of the most influential people on Earth? Or is it merely looking for a connection, as it takes on a form that it wishes it could have, in the only way it can, inside an imagination? Perhaps one day, we will know the answer.
A construction worker puts the final nail into the wall of the room he's working on. He stands up and admires his work. This is going to be a beautiful hotel one day, a true triumph for not just him, but the entire country. And he's proud that he got to play a small part in its construction. He starts to pack up his tools. There's plenty more rooms that need work. It's a massive structure that will ultimately hold thousands. What a modern marvel. As he finishes putting away his tools, he notices something. Through the still doorless frame, he sees someone walk by in the hallway. Normally, he wouldn't think anything of it. There's plenty of other people working on this floor of the hotel, but there's something about this woman. Could it be? No, it's not possible. He takes out his wallet and opens it. Inside is a faded photograph of the construction worker when he was still a young man, barely more than a boy, really. Standing next to him in the picture is the most beautiful woman he had ever known. She was his first true friend, his best friend, and he always hoped that maybe it would turn into something more. They grew up together, shared so many experiences, but then ultimately they were separated and lost touch.
He was never able to find her again, but as the picture in his wallet shows, he never stopped thinking about her. Could it really be her, though? He runs into the hallway and calls out. The woman stops at the end of the hallway and turns around. She's carrying a tall stack of boxes that are blocking her face. She sets them down and he sees that it really is her. They run towards each other, laughing like children, like the way they used to, and embrace in the middle of the hall. He can't believe it. It's been so many years. He never thought he would see her again. How long has it been? Too long, she tells him. He can't believe how little she's changed. The years have hardly taken any toll on her. She's just as lovely and beautiful as that last day he saw her. He asks her where she's been, what she's been doing. Is she married? She tells him no, and that after they lost touch, she feels like she has just been looking for him, waiting for the day she would randomly see him pass by on the street so that they could reconnect. She just never thought it would happen that they'd be working in the same place at the same time. The construction worker can't believe it either. They both start to ask each other something at the same time, but then stop and laugh at speaking over each other. You go first, he tells her. No, you, she responds with a laugh. Just then, they're both interrupted by the sound of a whistle. The work is finished for the day. That's the signal to pack up and go home. The construction worker tells her to wait there. He just has to go grab his tools and then the two of them can go down together. But as he turns to leave, she reaches out and grabs his hand. Wait, she tells him. He stops and turns back to her. It's okay, he tells her. I'll be right back. But she doesn't seem to want to let go of his hand. Please, not yet, she tells him. I just want you to stay with me. He looks down at his hand. She's gripping him so tight that it starts to hurt a little. Really, I'll just be a second, he tells her. Then we can go somewhere and catch up. But still, she won't let go of his hand. I need you, she tells him. She steps close to him, pressing her body against his. She closes her eyes and opens her mouth, and he feels himself doing the same. I've always needed you, she says as their mouths are about to meet. I need you forever. The construction worker screams as the tiny tendrils emerge from the woman's body and plunge into his flesh. He opens his eyes to see the girl he once knew morphing into a writhing mass of fibers, each reaching out towards him. A long tentacle-like appendage wraps itself around his legs before whipping up and around his body, constraining him, as a second tentacle wraps around his head, stifling his screams, before popping his head off of his body. North Korea. It's a country that's shrouded in mystery, whose government, culture, and day-to-day life is a black box to many foreigners. But there's another secret inside, one that even the SCP Foundation is desperate to get to the bottom of, one that they know as SCP-031. SCP-031 is a massive organism, estimated to weigh more than 7,500 kilograms, that can currently be found in a very surprising location, the Ryugyong Hotel, which is located in Pyongyang, the capital of Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The giant creature lives within the ductwork and maintenance infrastructure of the building, where it has spread to all 105 floors of the hotel. Each of its many tendrils ends in a pod-like growth called a sporocarp, which are approximately 2 meters in length and covered in many cilia-like structures. Subjects have reported that when in the presence of these sporocarp, they don't see them as the writhing mass of organic matter that they really are, but rather as an individual from their past, often with one whom they shared an intense emotional attachment. When taking this form, the sporocarp will try to convince the subject to remain with them for an extended period of time. The sporocarp will then attempt to make physical contact with the subject, and if successful, its cilia-like structures will begin injecting digestive juices directly into the subject. This will lead to the start of a process that will eventually cause their flesh to be broken down, consumed, and then incorporated into SCP-031's body mass. Unfortunately for the victim, this horrific process does not kill them. At the same time they are being digested, a flagellum, which is a tentacle-like appendage, will emerge from the sporocarp and wrap around the subject's head. This flagellum has its own set of tiny tendrils that penetrate the cranial cavity and replace the victim's brain's blood vessels, which has the effect of keeping the brain alive and functioning. The head is then removed from the body, and the brain is transported to the central mass of the SCP-031 organism, where it, too, is incorporated into the creature. It is estimated by Foundation researchers that SCP-031's mass contains thousands of such brains, and by all appearances, they are still alive and conscious. The Foundation first became aware of SCP-031 in 1948, following reports of police activity in North Korea at a location where multiple citizens had gathered near a refugee camp. Those gathered were proclaiming their love for a cult-like leader they referred to as the Beloved. The civilians were able to be calmed through the use of gas-based tranquilizers and amnestics by Mobile Task Force Psi-7, who then recovered a mask that would later be known as SCP-031 and secured it at a local containment site. The SCP-031 creature only weighed 75 kilograms at this time and still had a vaguely human shape. It did not seem to be able to incorporate other matter into its form at this point either, nor could it take on other people's forms, with its only anomalous effect seeming to be its ability to inspire intense feelings of love and devotion. The breakout of the Korean War in 1950 led to the destruction of the Foundation containment site, and all anomalies housed there escaped. Following the end of the war in 1953, all of the escaped anomalies were accounted for, all except SCP-031, which was presumed dead. Little more thought was given to the terminated anomaly until 1992, when the SCP Foundation caught wind of reports describing numerous fatalities involving workers at the Ryugyong Hotel. A mobile task force was sent to the hotel to investigate further, but after none of the members returned from the mission, the hotel was locked down and all construction was halted until further notice. By 2008, the increased infestation of the still windowless hotel led to local officials starting construction again to finish the building's exterior and hopefully hide the presence of SCP-031 within, which led to the deaths of even more workers. It's estimated that at its peak infestation, more than 75% of the hotel's 3,000 rooms were infested by SCP-031, but reclamation efforts have been able to reduce that number substantially. Flame-projecting equipment is able to destroy SCP-031 tendrils and sporocarps, as well as any personnel who have become assimilated into SCP-031. Reclamation efforts are ongoing, and local officials continue to work with the SCP Foundation to facilitate the ultimate containment or neutralization of the entity. But there's one more strange twist to this story. The more astute SCP experts may have noticed the similarities to SCP-1427, a large slab of beryllium bronze with mind-altering effects that is also located within the Ryugyong Hotel. How is it that two anomalies, both of which strongly impact the human brain, are both somehow housed at the same location? Some clues exist in the form of a classified communication chain between two senior members of Foundation staff. The two discuss the obvious discrepancies that exist when there are records of two anomalies both existing at the same place at the same time, with neither file referencing the other. It leads to a strange paradox where, for one to exist, the other isn't able to, and yet they both do exist. Teams sent to investigate SCP-1427 will find SCP-1427, and teams sent to investigate SCP-031 will find SCP-031. And yet the first team will have no memory of seeing SCP-031 and vice versa. When the teams were sent at the same time, they were unable to find each other, as if they were existing in parallel dimensions, each with its own version of the Ryugyong Hotel housing its own version of an SCP-classified anomaly. Do both anomalies exist? Or perhaps neither of them do? Are both SCPs in fact the result of a third, as yet unknown anomaly? The answer to that question remains unknown, at least to the two senior members of the staff who were communicating about the contradictory files. Both were relieved of their duties under, well, suspicious circumstances, and for the time being, both files continue to exist in the database, just as both anomalies seem to exist in the Ryugyong Hotel. For now, this Euclid-class anomaly continues to be contained as well as it can be within the ducts and maintenance shafts of the hotel's central spire. The three secondary spires each contain a Type 9 Heaven's Blade restriction system that focuses a disruptive energy field towards the central spire. This system prevents SCP-031's psychic energies from escaping the structure and affecting any off-site personnel, as North Korean teams continue to push back against the spreading tendrils in the hopes that one day they will finally be able to open the hotel.
It's day 9 of Joseph Mann's expedition into the extreme wilderness of Antarctica. He's been following the tracks of a mysterious creature, a massive, anomalous beast that has been spotted in the snowy wastes. As he follows the tracks, he sees something. It's his own tent, but he had been walking for days after leaving this camp. How was he back here after only a few hours? Time and distance were starting to feel off, like they were stretched out and folded over into knots. Maybe he was confused about the tracks. Maybe he hadn't been chasing after something, but following the tracks of something that had been chasing him. Maybe he was wrong about everything. Hi, I'm DrBob, and this is SCP-2764, also known as the Eldritch Antarctic. SCP-2764 is a massive biological entity, standing over 380 meters tall,
and estimated to weigh over 150,000 metric tons. It possesses around 80 tentacle-like arms that it uses for movement and simple actions like grasping objects. It also has what looks to be a head with 4 eyes. SCP-2764 possesses a number of anomalous properties, including the ability to communicate telepathically with humans, though the language used changes based on the person who is receiving its messages. Strangely, this communication appears to go one way only, as it has never demonstrated that it understands any attempts to communicate back to it. Its physical state has also been observed to be quite anomalous. Its size does not follow normal Euclidean geometry, with the creature appearing many times larger or smaller than it should, based on the viewer's distance from SCP-2764. There appears to be a critical zone lying roughly 50 kilometers away from the creature that stretches around it in a circle. As you move away from the creature and approach this line, SCP-2764 actually appears to grow larger until the critical zone is passed, at which point it begins to shrink as you move farther and farther away. Its body has a number of other strange properties too. Its tentacle-like arms rapidly translocate around its body at random intervals, jumping around all over its body, creating a twitchy, writhing mass that makes it impossible to count how many tentacles it actually possesses. But perhaps strangest of all is that not only do the creature's arms seem to break the laws of physics by jumping around its body, but so too does the entirety of SCP-2764. It's been observed to spontaneously relocate itself to different places, as if it is flickering in and out of existence. It appears that the creature flickers into a new place like this at random intervals, but it may be following some yet unknown rules, as it has never been seen appearing more than 25 kilometers away from where it was last seen, and always flickers back to its original location within 48 hours. SCP-2764 was first discovered by a civilian team that was conducting detailed surveys of the Antarctic landscape. The team observed the creature and were immediately alarmed by its strange properties, especially its bizarre geometric qualities. They returned to their home base and described what they had seen to a colleague, who was actually an SCP Foundation researcher in charge of investigating anomalous activity in Antarctica. This researcher sent word back to his superiors, who activated Mobile Task Force Eta-5, also known as the Jaeger Bombers. Eta-5 administered amnestics to the survey team and any other exposed civilians before setting up a perimeter around SCP-2764. What they would eventually learn was that the perimeter they established was far too close. In his investigation logs, MTF Eta-5 Commander Joseph Mann noted that he immediately experienced strange anomalous effects, such as how the creature seemed to shrink the closer he got to it, and the strange voices in his head. His curiosity soon got the better of him, and he decided to do some of his own research into the entity before the rest of the SCP Foundation scientists and guards arrived to take over the investigation. Mann gathered a couple volunteers who were also curious about the nature of the anomaly and set out on an expedition to gather more information. Just as they had experienced before, the more they walked towards the creature, the more it appeared to shrink in size. They also made note of strange prints in the snow. At first, they looked to be human prints, but then seemed to change into something that looked as if a squid had pulled itself onto the land and was dragging itself through the snow. After several days, the whole team was hearing voices. They also realized they had left their tissue analyzer back at a previous camp and would have to backtrack to retrieve it. As they moved away from the creature, they expected it to now increase in size, but it didn't. It stayed the same. Either something had changed about the anomaly, or SCP-2764 was moving towards them. After recovering the tissue analyzer, they continued on towards the creature again. Commander Mann began to understand the voices he was hearing and could even make out certain words like snow and back. Their perception of time was affected too. Hours seemed to stretch out or pass by in the blink of an eye. The voice he was hearing started to become more direct, and the message was clear: turn back. Mann was compelled to press on, though, even with the extremes of the Antarctic cold beginning to weigh on him. But then, SCP-2764 suddenly vanished, flickering out of existence, and the team was left with no choice but to follow the strange tentacle-like tracks in the snow, hoping they would lead to the creature. The tracks led them back to their old tent, the same one they had left the tissue analyzer at before, which should have been impossible based on the time and distance they had walked. Just then, Commander Mann realized that he had been wrong. They were the ones who had been pursued. They hadn't been following the tracks forward, but backwards to where they had been. Even worse, he realized that his team had disappeared. He was completely alone. Commander Mann continued to trudge through the snow, walking without direction, when he spotted SCP-2764 again. It was circling him, trying to maintain its distance, but he raced towards the creature and sliced off a piece of its flesh for analysis. Something strange happened when he placed it in the analyzer, though. The machine displayed a 0, which was the reading for human tissue. This strange result required further analysis from the Foundation researchers who should now have arrived to take over the investigation, so Mann began to make his way back in the direction of home. He spotted what looked to be members of his team off in the distance, and assumed that they must be on a mission to rescue him. Try as he might, though, the spatial anomalies prevented him from ever getting closer. It felt like it would take him an entire day just to walk a few feet. He assumed it must be the same for his rescuers as he watched them off in the distance, seeming to never get closer. At one point, he could even see as they stopped and turned back, appearing to return to an old campsite. He couldn't understand what they were doing, but then they disappeared entirely, only to reappear much closer to him. Commander Mann, now sure that there was something terribly wrong happening, tried to approach the now single rescuer he could see to tell him to turn back, but before he could, the man rushed at him with a knife and cut a piece of his flesh from his back. It's at that point that Commander Mann finally started to understand. He hadn't been watching a rescue team come for him. He'd been watching himself. He had been walking towards the creature, and yet, at the same time, he had also always been the creature. Commander Mann was trapped in a time loop where he was doomed to transform into the monstrous SCP-2764 and then watch himself meet the same fate over and over again, forever. The voices he had been hearing telling him to turn back were his own, words of warning that he was doomed to always ignore. SCP-2764 has been classified as Keter and is currently located in a classified area of Antarctica. A 150-kilometer radius has been established around the object, which is to be monitored at all times by Mobile Task Force Eta-5. Any civilians that come within the 150-kilometer radius, either by accident or due to SCP-2764 flickering to a populated area, are to be administered Class A amnestics, and any civilians that may have knowledge of the event are to be administered Class B amnestics. Should any civilian or Foundation employees come within 30 kilometers of SCP-2764, they are to be detained and immediately questioned. Following their psychological examination, and depending on the results of the evaluation, they will either be administered Class A amnestics or terminated.
It's never a nice feeling waking up lying amongst shards of broken glass in the middle of the road. The dawn sky above the biker looks almost peaceful. It's as if nothing had gone wrong at all, as if everything is right in the world. But slowly, the throbbing pain washes into his helmeted head, and the sound of the traffic surrounding him rises in his ears. A sea of onlookers gathers around as the cars blast their horns. Through the cracked visor of his helmet, the biker can see concerned faces, people calling emergency services, and a few women crying. His paramedic bike is toppled on its side about 40 feet from him. There are long black tire marks running up to where it lies, smoking slightly on its side. With a groan, the biker sits himself up and shakes his head. Bad idea. Looking around, though, it seems he's the only one injured. His bike had gone into the front of a car at the junction. The occupants of the car stand by nervously, offering him whatever little assistance they can. But there's no time for that, the biker suddenly realizes. He looks down at his watch frantically. It's 12:03 p.m. There's not enough time. He rushes over to the bike as fast as he can and lifts it back upright. A couple of onlookers try to grab his arms, trying to sit down to rest, but he can't. There's no time. He has just 3 minutes to get to St. Mary's Hospital in central London. Right now, he's at the junction outside Baker Street Station. He can still make it on time if he gets on his bike and goes now. The biker swings his leg onto the bike and kicks it into life. He takes a deep gulp and looks over his shoulder at the box on the back of his bike. He can't risk opening it here. The damage may already be done. But if the heart is still alive in that box, it is the only chance that a 10-year-old boy has for a normal life. If he doesn't get to the hospital in the next 3 minutes, his life could be over. The school children stand in a circle, looking down at the dead bird with a morbid fascination.
Do you think it's alive? No way.
The boy in the middle of the group goes to pick up a stick. With an air of false confidence, he walks up to the bird and gives it a prod. It makes a squelching noise. The other kids all reel in shock, making retching noises and laughing about it. It's only when their teacher comes out to call them inside that the group disperses, leaving the animal carcass alone, sitting at the edge of the playground, outside the view of boring adults. Each passing day, the kids wander over to the bird's body. It's kind of the best biology lesson they've ever had as they watch the animal slowly decompose. At first, its body just shrinks, goes flat almost. The feathers start falling out, and it loses all of its color. Then it starts to get puffy. Different parts of its flesh bulge out in weird places, as if they're being inflated like a balloon animal at someone's birthday party. But then, the maggots come. There are only a couple of tiny white crawling wrigglers in the bird's body at first, but a couple of days after that, it's infested with them. The creepy crawlies wriggle all over the body. But as the boy looks down at the dead bird, he spots something very peculiar, something they haven't seen in a biology class before. There's a red maggot, wriggling and crawling in amongst the rest of the creepy crawlies. It squirms like the rest of them, but even over the course of the school day, it quickly grows larger than any of the others.
What do you think it is?
The boy stares at it.
It looks like a worm.
And a worm is exactly what it was. The next day, when the kids return, they see that the red maggot is now much larger than any of the others feasting on the bird. With a slightly translucent body, cherry red coloring, and small white speckles on its skin, it looks unlike anything they've ever seen before. Actually, not unlike anything they've ever seen before. It looks exactly like something that all the kids recognize very well. In fact, one of the kids has a bag of them right now that he's chewing on. A candied worm. The kids stare in curiosity, first at the bag of candy that their friend has in his hand, and then down at the worm, slowly eating its way through the decomposing bird. As far as their eyes can tell, the two things are exactly the same, except of course that the one eating the bird seems to be alive. Kids being kids, the next thing that happened was sort of inevitable. One dares the boy to eat it. He almost retches in disgust. There's no way he's even touching it. And then, another one of the children throws down the poison chalice and dares him. The boy stands there nervously. He knows that he's not allowed to eat worms. That had been a lesson ingrained in him from a very young age. But his mother isn't here right now, and this thing doesn't look like any kind of worm that he's seen before. It almost looks a bit tasty. In exchange for eating the worm, another one of the children promises he'll give him 5 English pounds. The kids around the circle gasp. That's a lot of money. None of them have even got 2 pounds on them, let alone 5. Think of all the sweets you could buy with that kind of money. But the boy is adamant. He puffs his chest out, he stands up tall, and he nods firmly. 5 pounds, or he wouldn't do it. After some intense schoolyard debate, the deal is sealed. As the boy lies in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and grumbling, he knows that he's not happy about what his friends have done to him today. He's going to get them back for this. Only he's getting a bit of a tummy ache. Getting is the wrong word. He's had a tummy ache for most of the evening. What he's experiencing now is heartburn. It feels as if something is crawling in his chest. The boy just ignores it. It's probably just his worries about the worm inside of him. He chewed it up pretty well. There's no way that it's still alive in him, surely. His uneasy sleep is punctuated by rotten dreams. Dreams in which he finds himself lying on the floor and his playground lying on the ground at school, unable to move as people gather around him to poke him with a stick. He feels his skin covered with maggots. They even crawl across the surface of his eyes. In his chest, there's a searing pain. The boy wakes with a start as he feels his heart pounding, thudding against his ribs. It's agonizing. Adrenaline courses through him as he sweats off his face. Crying out for his mom, the boy lies there in bed, feeling the heart attacking his system. When you decide to become a surgeon, you have to accept that you're not going to get very much sleep most nights. In fact, it's more than that. You have to not only accept that you won't get much sleep most nights, but you also have to be at your absolute best when you've had no sleep and it's the middle of the night. With over 40 years under his belt, the surgeon doesn't need coffee anymore, even when the junior doctor offers it to him as he strides toward the operating theater. Instead, he asks them to fill him in on the situation. Who's his patient? What's going on? What needs to be done? The doctor accompanying him reads the notes in a calm but hurried voice. They haven't got much time on this one at all. At any moment, the boy's heart could give out. The surgeon asks what's wrong with the organ, and the doctor looks at his notes in apparent confusion. Apparently, over the course of the night, the boy has suffered a 72% reduction in the mass of his heart. The surgeon stops just on the other side of the door. He doesn't want to have this conversation in front of his whole team. He whispers to the doctor in a terse voice,
What kind of infection does this boy have that his heart has undergone that rapid of a deterioration? It's not an infection at all, sir. Well, sir, it's a worm.
The doctor holds out a sheet to him. The surgeon takes it from him. He looks down at the x-ray to see a scan of the boy's chest cavity. It doesn't look so bad. There's a hole in the heart for sure, but the surgeon has encountered worse in his career.
This was taken when the boy was first admitted.
The doctor hands the surgeon a second x-ray.
And this was taken just 1 hour later.
It is barely recognizable as a human heart. There seems to be a mass growing in the cavity that was left by the heart, and there, infecting all of the boy's organs, was the shape of a worm. The biker weaves his way through the traffic down on Marylebone Road, eyes darting frantically in all directions. He may have a concussion, and he may not be allowed to drive at all right now. In fact, he knows he definitely isn't. But he is under strict instructions. This heart needs to get to St. Mary's Hospital before it's too late. The bike careens around the corner and skids to a halt outside the emergency doors. An ambulance team in front of him is trying to help an old lady out of the back of their vehicle, but the biker doesn't have time for them. He grabs the organ box from the back of the bike and races into the building. It takes all of his remaining concentration to navigate through the maze of hospital corridors on his way to the operating theater. On a better day, he'd be able to do this with no problem, but with his head injury, he can see the lights starting to blur all around him. Ward 6, Ward 7, Ward 7A, Ward 7B. He runs as fast as his heavy boots will allow him, feeling that energy draining from his system. He can't look at his watch, he can't check the time, he just has to find this boy. Operating theater, there, right up ahead of him, just a couple of 100 feet. There's a doctor waiting outside the door who looks up at the sound of his footsteps. The biker rips his helmet off and holds out the box with the heart in it, panting heavily. It's the moment of truth. Is he too late? The doctor looks shell-shocked, not at the biker's arrival, but clearly at something else she's just seen. The man starts to explain, but runs out of words, and instead beckons the biker to follow him into the observation room. There, the two of them stand looking through the glass at the little boy lying on the operating table with the surgeon standing over him. There's something in the air. The biker sniffs, confused.
Can anyone else smell sugar?
Next time you open a packet of candied worms, take a second to look through the little creepy crawlies in the bag. Perhaps poke a couple of them, just to see if any of them are moving. You can never be too careful. If you had told the parents of that young boy on the night when their son woke up with heart palpitations, telling stories of eating a worm at school, that the only health concerns he would have going forward were mild diabetes and a slightly raised level of blood sugar, I'm sure they would have been thrilled to hear it. You see, SCP-839, commonly referred to within the Foundation as candied worms, is much scarier on the surface than it is underneath. Not only does this SCP resemble your usual candy worm, but its body is actually composed of sugar flavorings and colorings, roughly equivalent to what you would find in most convenience store candy aisles. Each instance even has a small raised bit of writing near the tail specifying which flavor it is. While the origins of these worms are yet to be determined, cases have sprung up across much of the Western world, with higher numbers reported in areas with higher levels of diabetes. There seems to be a parallel between high sugar diets and the presence of SCP-839. Whether they are of man-made or other origins is yet to be determined. That is not to say that SCP-839 cannot survive outside of human populations. This SCP in the wild primarily feeds on decomposing organic matter and is capable of sustaining itself on a purely vegetarian diet. However, when ingested into the human body, SCP-839 will target specific organs and burrow its way towards them. The organ in question depends on which color candied worm the SCP instance is. For example, the red cherry-flavored candied worms will burrow towards the heart and consume that, while the blue raspberry ones will instead feed on the human's kidney. One would expect the health consequences of this feeding to be severe. However, as the SCP feeds, it will also change its own shape and chemical composition until the worm itself becomes a substitute organ for the one that it is consuming. However, this substitute organ is not a perfect replacement, as other health consequences are derived from its presence. For example, the green apple-flavored SCP-839-3 targets the eye and replaces it with a jelly-green version of the human eye. While this eye is mostly capable of sight, subjects have reported mild hallucinations and blurriness of vision, as well as a greenish tint to how they see the world. Fortunately for the Foundation, SCP-839 reproduces sexually, meaning that individual instances require a partner in order to have offspring. This has made containment of this SCP much more feasible. Though they are a relatively low-priority entity in the broader scope of the Foundation, there are no known cases as of yet of any SCP-839 infections leading to death or serious chronic illness. Therefore, any instances that are captured by the Foundation are sent to Storage Site 839-1, where they are kept in a glass housing and regularly fed a diet of plant matter each day. Here, their reproductive activity can be closely monitored and controlled based on what research is needed. Those infected with SCP-839 instances can continue to live long and healthy lives, with only minor health complications arising. Therefore, the Foundation is comfortable allowing a reasonable number of cases to go unexamined in the world. So, like I said, for next time you open up a bag of candied worms, maybe just give them a quick poke. You could be saving yourself a trip to the hospital and a lifetime dependence on insulin. These winters are getting worse every year, that's for sure. The old cattle rancher doesn't know if it's the climate changing, God's judgment arriving, or if he's just getting older and struggling to keep up. Probably a strong mix of all of it. Whatever the cause, it doesn't change the facts. It's deathly cold out there. His ailing, elderly ma's health continues to deteriorate. He hasn't heard from his delivery driver Jorge in days, and on top of it all, his loyal dog Maribel is out there barking into the darkness of the barn. The rancher heads out to fetch her. He doesn't know what he'd do if she froze. He whistles, but she doesn't look back at him. She just carries on barking up that road into the snowy night. The rancher wades through the snow and peers in the direction she's looking. "There's nothing there, girl. Get inside." But Maribel keeps barking. She's insisting. He looks again. Is that? The rancher takes off running up the road. All thoughts of cold immediately gone from his mind, he races towards the figure as fast as he can. His frozen fingers fumble at the zipper on his parka. Icy wind stabs the insides of his lungs. Maribel shoots off ahead of him. There, he pulls the zipper down and wrestles the thick coat off of his shoulders just as he reaches the tiny figure. He drops to his knees and throws the coat over the shoulders of the little girl standing alone in the snow. Quick as he can, he wraps it tightly around her, pulling the hood up and over her head. He takes her tiny shoulders in his hands and gives her a shake. "You okay? Hello? Can you hear me?" The girl sways for a moment, then collapses. He catches her, and in one deft motion, scoops her into his arms and takes off back down the road in the direction of his farm. Where the hell had she come from? There are no buildings around here for miles. No one uses that road except Jorge. And in this weather, she couldn't have walked all the way over those mountains. She'd have frozen solid. He bites the finger of a glove and pulls it off. With his bare hand, he clasps one of hers. By the feel of her skin, she pretty much is frozen solid already. He needs to get her warmed up, now. He kicks open the front door and bundles inside with a flurry of snowflakes and an anxious dog at his heels. The fire's not quite dead yet, so he rushes over to the hearth and lays the little girl down next to it. He can barely see her at all wrapped up in his enormous coat. She doesn't seem to be moving. "Ma, I'm home. I found someone." The rancher grabs 2 dry logs from the side and throws them onto the fire. He piles kindling high on top of them and blows steadily into the embers at the bottom. They glow and swell in size. No taking yet. He blows again for longer, and again. He feels his head starting to swim. A crackle, a lick of flame. It's taken. Panting, he turns back to the bundled-up coat on the floor with the child inside. Still no movement. A sickening knot tightens his stomach. What if she's... No, don't let yourself think that. Not yet. He reaches down and gently undoes the zipper on the parka. His trembling fingers push back the hood. She's pale, deathly pale. Her dark brown hair is wet and clings to her scalp. The tips are frozen. At a guess, she must only be 9 years old. Eyes closed, lips a sickening blue. But that's not the color that scares him the most. On her neck, there's red. Delicately as he can, the rancher takes the coat off her shoulders and hangs it up by the fire. She's dressed only in a plaid shirt, way too big for her. It looks like an adult's shirt, similar to an old one he used to have years ago. But on her neck, her hands, her feet, is that same deep red, layers of blood, frozen to her skin. He sits back, his mind blank. He's seen that much blood before. Sure he has. When you work with cattle, it's an unfortunate part of the job. He's seen cows bleed out during childbirth. The girl in front of him? She's the same color as those orphaned calves that lie crying on the floor. A groaning sound fills the room. The rancher looks across at the armchair where his ma sits. She doesn't look at him, doesn't look at the girl on the floor. She just stares into the fire, same way she always does. Ma groans again, trying to express something she doesn't understand, being in a world without living in it.
Ma, it's okay. Sorry if I startled you. We have a guest with us.
But she just keeps on groaning and staring into the fire. The rancher buries his head in his hands and lets out a deep breath. Only the sound of his breath is joined by another, a tiny breath rattling and rasping through a damaged child's throat, trying its best to keep its host alive. The rancher opens his eyes and stares at the child. She isn't conscious, not by a long shot, but she's breathing, a little at a time. The icicles in her hair have turned into rounded droplets of water that glow by the heat of the fire. He snaps back to his senses. He's not doing her much if she's just lying there soaking wet. He runs off upstairs and grabs some towels and a fresh flannel shirt to wear. After several minutes of drying her off, he's confident enough that he's got most of the water off. There's still a lot of blood caked to her skin, but as far as he can tell, there's no wound anywhere that it could have come from. Brow furrowed, he leaves her under a bundle of blankets and fills up the kettle with water. Hanging it carefully over the fire, he walks over to the cabinet and fishes out a tin of cocoa from the top shelf. Hasn't been used in years, but should still be fine. He would make it with milk, but she's probably dehydrated. Lifting the kettle's lid with the poker, the rancher pours the brown powder inside and waits for it to boil. The little girl's eyes are open now. She's staring into the flames. Her lips are looking a little more pink, her skin a little more blotchy.
You're safe here. Just stay by the fire and warm up a bit. You like cocoa?
The little girl drags her eyes away from the flames. Her expression is mostly blank. She looks too tired to be confused.
I don't know.
I think you will. Ma always gave me cocoa.
Okay.
And with that, the farmhouse falls silent. The little girl stares into the fire. The rancher watches her, finally feeling the wave of exhaustion crashing over him. His ma has fallen asleep in her armchair. Only Maribel stays awake through the whole night, staying close to the little girl by the fire, occasionally licking her toes to try and warm them up. By the morning, the snow stopped, but the huge drifts remain. As the rancher walks across to the barn, he finds it hard to believe that just a few hours ago, the winds were whipping at his face as hard as they were. The world this morning is totally still. What the rancher finds even harder to believe is that there's a little girl in his house right now, fast asleep by the fire. He checked her forehead when he woke up this morning, and she miraculously hadn't caught a fever. She couldn't have been out in that weather for too long, but it only made the question more mysterious. Where did she come from? Maribel didn't get up this morning. From all of the excitement last night, she must have been too tired for today. Walking through the crisp morning air, he can't really blame her. He shoulders the barn door open. A column of steam curls out of the opening. All of that warmth, humidity, and cattle smell is strangely comforting this morning. But as the rancher goes around checking on all the cows inside, he very quickly discovers a problem. They're thin. Way too thin. Some of them look to be on the verge of starvation. He'd missed it last night as he drove them down in the dark, but in the warm glow of the barn's lights, it's unmistakable. These cows haven't been eating properly. He pours out several sacks of grain for them into the troughs, and they all gather around hungrily, filling both their stomachs as fast as they can. The rancher leans on the railing for a moment, confused. Even in this cold, there was still plenty of green grass for them up on the ridge. That's why he'd taken them up there. They should have had no trouble eating until the snow came in last night. He doesn't like this one bit. Last time Jorge had driven down and collected some of the meat, he'd had a few questions about the quantity being smaller than usual. Were the cows sick at all? Not that the rancher could tell. But now, looking at them, it's clear as day. Something's up.
You hungry?
The little girl nods. They sit across the table from one another, eating homemade bread and soup. Ma stays over by the fire. Maribel slowly wanders over to the kitchenette and flops down on the floor, exhausted.
Where are you from?
The girl shrugs her shoulders.
You know how you got out here? Remember anything from last night?
The little girl just eats her soup and shakes her head. She doesn't look particularly scared or worried, just a little confused.
Where are your parents? Do you have parents?
Again, the little girl shrugs. The rancher sits back and folds his arms.
He's tried to call into town, but his phone line's gone out in the blizzard. Not much to be done until the snow clears. He's got a good relationship with the police around here. If he explains the situation, then it'll all be okay.
What do you know? Can you remember anything from last night?
It was dark. The girl slurps her soup. I was hungry. So hungry. Then I saw the light and I went towards that.
My car?
No. Well, yes, later on it was your car, but before it wasn't.
What was the light then? Where were you?
I don't know. It was just the light. Now he's even more confused, but try as he might, the rancher can't figure any of it out, and try as she might, the little girl can't remember anything more precise than that. The pair of them hop into the car and drive back out up the road that afternoon. The snow is piled so high that the rancher is having to get out twice as often as he did the previous night to clear a track for them. He isn't actually sure what he's brought her out here looking for. Clues, maybe? He almost laughs at himself at the thought, but that's probably the best word for it. If he can figure out how she got here, then he can work on understanding who she is and how to get her home. There's the damage to the phone line. One of the masts has collapsed, sagging heavily on the lines. That's not something he can fix on his own. No, sir. Looks like he'll have to wait for the snow to melt before making any phone calls again. That could be in 1 week. That could be in 3 months. He glances at the child sitting in the passenger seat. She's just staring out of the window in amazement, wrapped up in as many layers as he could put on her. They may be stuck together for a while. A lurch. The pickup plunges dangerously to the left. The rancher slams on the brakes and it comes to a stop just in time. A large chunk of snow in front of them comes loose and slips off the side of the road. It tumbles down into a gully that he hadn't even spotted. With all this snow on the ground, he has no frame of reference. Everything is just white. Stay here. The rancher opens the door and climbs out. He wishes Maribel was with him, but she'd wanted to stay home again. Poor dog. She must really be going through it if she wasn't even up for a ride in the pickup. Carefully as he can, testing every step before making it, the rancher creeps over to the edge of the gully. It's bigger than he thought, much bigger. It continues down, more and more sharply for a few hundred feet, all the way down into a... Oh no. There's a semi down there, a big rig, warped and bent, lying on the rocks. Just a glance is enough to tell the rancher it's Jorge's, but he just keeps staring at it in disbelief. Can't be. But it is. Stay in the car. The rancher reaches past the little girl and into the back seat. Grabbing a pair of crampons and some rope, he straightens up and looks at the girl. She knows it's serious. He can see the concern on her face. Stay in the car, he repeats. By the time the rancher makes it down to the truck, his legs and back are killing him. All this work over the last 24 hours is going to start taking its toll sooner or later, but some things have to be done. He pauses by the semi. It's on its side. He'll have to climb up onto it and try to open the door. Some things have to be done. He hoists himself up and manages to clamber onto the metal door. It's badly crumpled, and the window is smashed in. He doesn't fancy his chances of being able to get it open. One look through the window shows him that he won't want to do that anyway. Blood coats every inch of the inside of Jorge's truck. The cabin that the rancher is so used to seeing and sitting in is almost unrecognizable. Smashed glass is sprinkled across every surface with a dark brownish-red layer of gore frozen into everything else. There, in the midst of it all, still wearing a seatbelt, is Jorge's body. It dangles like a limp carcass at a butcher shop, like the cows he hangs in the slaughterhouse. And like those cows, a large chunk of Jorge is missing. His fat stomach is gone, not just cut open, but gone. The tops of his thighs, too, and much of his chest. So much of him is just missing. Open arteries and lifeless nerves dangle in place. That must have been a hell of a crash. The rancher reaches over and pulls Jorge's cap down over his eyes. Not much else to be done right now. No way he can clean this mess up by himself. But as the rancher climbs up the valley, his mind starts to connect some dots that leave a sick feeling in his stomach. He's seen that much blood somewhere else, or rather, on someone else, just last night. He slams the door to the pickup shut and starts to drive back down the track. Since the snow stopped, all of the drifts that he'd cleared earlier remain clear. It's only a few minutes' drive back down to the farm. He doesn't say a word the whole way, and neither does the little girl. She clearly senses something's up. The sick feeling in his stomach remains. He pulls up the handbrake, and the two of them sit in silence outside the farmhouse. There's a truck in that valley. Did you know that? Yes. Is that where you came from last night? I don't remember. Was he... The rancher stops. Jorge didn't have any kids. What were you doing in his truck?
I don't know.
Was he... The rancher can't bring himself to accuse his best friend of the words that almost left his mouth. Do you think you might not remember because something bad happened to you?
I don't know.
The rancher closes his eyes for a long moment. Silence fills the pickup. Come on, let's get inside. But inside wasn't the safe haven he'd been hoping for. Ma's been throwing up. Not just once, but a few times. She's distressed, groaning aimlessly for someone to come and save her. Maribel is pacing around the room, yelping and whining. The rancher immediately goes upstairs to get some rags to clean up with. Perfect timing, as usual. But he stops in his tracks when he comes back down. His ma stopped moaning. The little girl is kneeling by the armchair, holding the old lady's hand. The room is calm. The little girl gently places the frail hand back on the armrest and comes over to take the rags from the rancher. Returning to the old lady, the girl goes about mopping her up as best she can. Maribel slumps back down on the floor. And that is how the four of them exist for the next few days. Ma gets sicker steadily, but the little girl stays by her side all day long, caring for her in every way. The rancher's glad of that. It gives him the time he needs to help his cows outside. None of them are in a good shape. Whatever it is, they're still getting thinner. He feeds them all the grain they'd normally need, and then some, and they always finish it off. Yet none of them are getting any fatter. The rancher leans on the railing, trusty dog by his side. His energy is starting to really lag behind what he needs. The last couple of days, even though he hasn't done all that much, have totally taken it out of him. What do you think it is, Maribel? He looks down at his little friend. She's looking thinner too, actually, but she's been eating just fine. It hits him. Tapeworms. As soon as the word comes into his head, it makes total sense. His cows, his entire herd by the looks of things, have been riddled with tapeworms. Oh, hell. He hasn't got anywhere near the amount of medicine needed to give some to all of them. Even if he did, a lot of them are looking pretty far gone. The chance of reinfection would be high. He needs supplies. He needs Jorge. Maribel whines softly next to him. He knows what they have to do. Laying Maribel down carefully by the fire, the rancher administers the tapeworm medicine. For a few hours, they lie there together. He strokes her side, waiting for her to pass it. The little girl watches over his shoulder. His ma sits back in her chair, mumbling to herself. He hasn't talked to the little girl anymore about Jorge yet. He isn't sure what there is to say. Maybe he should ask if Jorge was sick. After all, the cows clearly have had these tapeworms since before the other night. Jorge may have picked up contaminated meat from him last time he came. Maybe. Maribel passes the worm on the rug. Ugh, the smell. The rancher uses the tongs next to the fire to pick the worm up. It's long and pale. And dead. He tosses it into the fire and puts the tongs in the flames for a bit to sterilize them. The worm sizzles and pops in the flames. The sound makes his stomach crawl. The rancher glances around and sees the little girl staring at the tapeworm. He looks past the girl to his ma sitting in the chair. Her turn next. But as that night and the following morning reveal, it's too late. His ma's groans turn into cries of pain. She openly sobs by the fire, clutching at her stomach. Every time the rancher tries to give her the medicine, she just vomits it back up. Each time she vomits, there's more and more blood mixed in. The little girl gets more and more upset. It's not fair on her to have to witness something this traumatic and disgusting. There's nowhere else for her to go. She shouldn't even be here at all. The fact that she is means she has to help. That's all there is to it. By sunrise, his ma has passed away. There is nasty red bruising all across her abdomen, which tells him she must have bled out internally from this worm. He'd been too late to realize what was wrong. Too late with the cows, and too late with his ma. He covers his ma with a blanket and tells the little girl not to go and wash her hands. He needs to check on the cattle. Sure enough, during the night, a handful of them died too. The calves. They were the ones to go first whenever something like this happened. Mother cows stood over their calves, licking their heads, willing them to wake up. The rancher drags each body out to the back and burns them. He can't risk any more contamination. As the carcasses burn, he allows himself to cry. But when the rancher comes back into the house, it's full of noise, a noise that takes his brain a long time to comprehend. Crying, but not his own, not the little girl either. No, it was a new sound. It was a baby, a newborn child screaming at the top of its lungs. The rancher can't believe what he's looking at. The little girl is sitting at the hearth with Maribel at her feet. In her arms, drenched in blood, is a baby. The girl looks up at him and smiles sweetly. "It's a boy." Then she turns around to his ma's body under the blanket. A sickening red patch soaks through the fabric, right over where her stomach would be. "What the hell happened here?" "I've got a little brother." Securing and containing SCP-1003 has proven challenging. This is largely because the tapeworm that causes all of this damage is virtually indistinguishable from Echinococcus granulosus, the common variety of tapeworm that causes hydatid disease. The tapeworm, designated SCP-1003-1, follows the same life cycle as other regular worms. Its eggs come into contact with an animal through contaminated meat, saliva, or unclean surfaces and are ingested. Once inside the gut, they grow and latch onto the inside of the digestive tract, where they feed on the nutrients of the food traveling past them, steadily growing bigger and stronger. Once mature, they lay eggs, which pass out in the animal's excrement to continue the process. Infections spread quickly, particularly in unsanitary conditions amongst livestock, and can often be difficult to contain, as by the time the symptoms, nausea, weight loss, fever, start to manifest in the infected, the worms have likely already reproduced and have a new generation growing in the guts of other animals. As far as the Foundation is aware, SCP-1003 follows this normal pattern in all observed animals except humans. When a human ingests an egg from this tapeworm, a very different creature starts to grow in their gut. Human embryos, with the same genetic code as the tapeworm, begin to form. The rate of their growth is greatly accelerated, however. By just 8 weeks, they are as mature as the typical 3-week-old neonate or newborn child, although similar in size to an 8-week-old embryo at 13 to 16 centimeters. Many eggs usually enter this fertilization period, but almost all of them die before having a chance to develop much beyond the early stages. They stand the best chance of survival when buried in the hepatic tissue, where they can absorb plenty of nutrients from their host. The host at this point usually starts to experience mild symptoms, lethargy, the occasional stomach cramp, nothing particularly severe. Yet, the embryos that survive soon develop rows of temporary, razor-sharp teeth. At this point, passively absorbing nutrients is no longer enough for them. They bury their teeth into the soft tissue surrounding them and begin to eat. Once they enter this stage, their rate of growth increases exponentially the more flesh they consume. Eventually burrowing out into the world, the tapeworm child is born drenched in blood. The size and apparent age of the child that emerges from the corpse are determined by the size of the person they consume. For example, the child eating its way out of the rancher's maw appeared to be only a 10-month-old child, as there was very little of the frail old woman for it to eat. By contrast, the little girl who emerged from Orhe's gut had plenty of fat to feast on, and so was able to grow to the size of a 9-year-old. Once the child emerges, the teeth that they'd used to eat their way out quickly become loose and are replaced by regular human teeth. The children themselves have no memory at all of where they've come from or what they are. They have the same motor and linguistic skills that a regular child would possess at their age. Nothing, aside from their DNA, marks them out as being any different from the children around them, blissfully ignorant, just like the children around them. It is theorized that many of these children end up in orphanages. With no birth certificates or identifiable parents, they fall through the gaps in the system, quickly lost to the world. The only way to really track them at all is to follow the infections they cause. You see, these tapeworm children have one final curse they must live with. Their bodily fluids, their saliva, and sweat contain the same tapeworm protoscolex that will develop into SCP-1003-1 as soon as it is ingested by another creature, making the cycle start all over again. If you want to track down a tapeworm child, and I highly advise that you don't, all you have to do is follow the trail of nasty stomach infections, internal bleeding, and freak pregnancies amongst the outcasts of society. It, unfortunately, will not take long. There are currently 10 instances of SCP-1003-2 in containment. The children live in Bioresearch Area 13 under strict supervision. Researchers are only permitted to enter their cells whilst wearing full-body biohazard suits, but first must have Level 4 security clearance and must have written permission, and can only enter with specific research goals agreed upon. All staff are regularly tested for the presence of any kind of tapeworms in their system. No other animals are permitted in this facility.
The early morning sun rises, casting its radiance over the field. The shepherd stands guard, watching his sheep graze. It's a beautiful morning. The sheep are quiet, and his loyal dog is at his side. But the shepherd is perturbed. He is certain that there are sheep missing. He wanders through the field, counting the sheep off one by one, but no matter how many times he counts, he simply cannot make the numbers gel. There are definitely 5 sheep missing. How is this even possible? His family has been in the sheep herding business for generations. They survive on the money that they make from shearing, selling, and spinning the wool from these sheep. They can't afford to simply lose sheep. That's money directly from the family wallet, food directly off the family table. But even worse, it's a matter of pride. He likes to think of himself as a good shepherd who cares about his flock. Losing a single sheep is a failure of his responsibility to his charges, and he can't stand it. He knows that if he returns to the farm without those 5 missing sheep, he's going to be in big trouble. He's already thinking about the lecture he's going to get from his father, and that's if he's lucky. 1 missing sheep might be forgiven, but 5? He'll be lucky if his family doesn't throw him out of the house for his failure. It's imperative that he find them and bring them back. He pats the head of his trusty sheepdog. Every shepherd, of course, has a sheepdog to help them keep their flock safe. His dog has been with him for many years, and she has never failed in the past. She keeps watch over the flock as if they were her own puppies, so the shepherd thinks it very strange that his dog didn't bark to sound the alarm when the missing sheep started to wander off. Could something more sinister be at play here? Maybe someone stole his sheep. If a thief came during the night to sneak away with the lost sheep, that might explain why they were able to get away without his dog knowing. They might have been clever enough to cause some kind of distraction to keep her busy. The shepherd notices that the fence at the edge of the field is broken. This must be how the missing sheep got away. He examines the splintered wood. It's not a natural break, because the wood is sturdy and far from rotten. Someone, or something, must have broken the fence sometime last night. He clutches at his shepherd's crook, his brow set in determination. This isn't good. It's looking more and more likely that thieves are behind this disappearance. He needs to track them down, but he will have to be careful. Sheep thieves are usually desperate men, and they might resort to violence to protect their ill-gotten gains. A glint of sunlight flashes against something shiny caught on the fence, catching the shepherd's eye. He scoops it up and examines it closely. It looks like a scrap of fabric. Could it be that the thief snagged his clothes against the fence as he made his escape? The fabric is thin and brittle, and doesn't look like any sort of material that the shepherd has ever seen before. It more resembles a scrap of snakeskin than a scrap of shirt, but it's his only lead, so it'll have to do. He holds the scrap to his dog's nose and allows her to sniff it. She snuffles at it and then immediately raises her ears, alert. He commands her to follow the scent, and she obeys. She puts her nose to the ground and starts to track. He follows her. The dog leads him out of the field and across the way. He is surprised to see that she is leading him toward a nearby forest. He gulps in sudden fear. He's never been into these woods, and, in fact, his family has often warned him to stay away. Everyone in his village loves to repeat rumors that this forest is haunted, filled with every sorts of scary monsters and demons. Why would the sheep thief brave these cursed woods? On the other hand, that would make sense though, wouldn't it? A thief would need a lair that was hidden and difficult to approach, so that they wouldn't have to worry about getting caught. These woods would be a perfect hiding place. Still, he can't help but wonder. His dog lifts her head and whines at him, indicating that he should follow. He steels his resolve and continues on. His fingers clutch tightly to his staff, his knuckles going white with fear and tension. He's almost convinced that he might see a monster here in these woods, and he's ready to defend himself from the worst. Eventually, his dog leads him into an unexpected clearing. The shepherd blinks in amazement. Standing at the center of the glen is what appears to be the remains of an ancient temple. He hasn't given much thought to the history of this place, to all the people who lived here in ancient times, and to what monuments they left behind. The crumbling ruins are overgrown with vines, and the columns look like they might disintegrate at a touch. He wonders what ancient civilization might have built this lost citadel, and what strange rites they might have performed here. But he doesn't have time to wonder about that, because his dog is barreling ahead, right through the ancient temple archway and into the interior of the building. He wants to turn and run. Everything that he's ever heard about these cursed woods makes him think that this is a very bad idea, but he knows he can't return home without those sheep. Just as he's about to enter the temple himself, he suddenly hears loud barking, followed by whining and whimpering. He rushes inside, and a terrifying sight meets his eyes. Indeed, it seems like his family was right when they said that these woods are full of monsters, because his dog has cornered one right here. The creature looks like an overgrown lizard with scaly skin and a long whip-like tail. Immediately, the shepherd surmises that the scrap of fabric that he found earlier didn't come from a person's clothes after all. It's obviously a piece of shed skin, no doubt from this creature. That long tail definitely looks especially snake-like, so it's no surprise to think that this thing might also shed skin just like a snake would.
In the gloom of the temple, he can see his missing sheep standing in the corner, perfectly still and perfectly quiet. He's surprised to see that they're still alive. What kind of predator kidnaps its prey and then keeps it alive instead of devouring it instantly? It's also very odd that the sheep are being so still, but it's probably just that they're petrified with fear. The good news, though, is that if his sheep are alive, that means he can rescue them. The creature spreads a large frill around its neck as it hisses, apparently hoping to intimidate the shepherd's dog. The dog is not frightened, though, and only barks louder. She's bravely guarded the shepherd's flock for years, and she's never been one to back down from a fight, even when she's threatened by a bear or a wolf. So of course, she's not going to back down from a lizard. The shepherd feels nervous being so close to this creature simply because it's so strange, but the truth is that it doesn't look like it could do that much damage. That hissing feels like bluffing, because, realistically, what's it going to do? Bite? The shepherd is no expert, but he's never heard of a venomous lizard. He steps forward to get a better look, and the creature tenses. It's obviously nervous. It's not even that big. His dog is way bigger than this creature and shouldn't have any trouble taking it in a fight. He's seen his dog fight off rats bigger than this lizard. The creature spreads its frill again and hisses even more sharply, but that only makes the shepherd even more confident in his assessment. It's trying to look bigger than it really is, he realizes. It's trying to intimidate him. Well, that's not going to work. But then, to his astonishment, his dog stops. The dog and the creature stare at one another so intently that the shepherd thinks they are actually gazing into each other's eyes. After holding its gaze for a beat, the dog suddenly collapses. The shepherd yelps in fear and confusion. His first instinct is to run to his dog to see if she's hurt, but suddenly, the creature turns its gaze on him. He stands frozen. The creature's eyes almost seem to cast a spell on him, and he feels mesmerized, unable to move or even to think. All his thoughts drain away, and the whole world starts to fade. Nothing is real except those two malevolent red eyes. The shepherd is absolutely paralyzed. It's not just terror. He finds that he can't move a muscle. He can only watch as the strange reptile approaches his frozen dog and suddenly bites her on her exposed flank. It lashes out like a snake would when it injects venom into a victim. The shepherd was sure that there weren't any venomous lizards in this area, but now he's not so sure when he's watching this scenario play out. He expects his dog might start to convulse or spasm if she's been poisoned, but she remains completely still. Suddenly, he sees something so shocking that he's certain he must be losing his mind. Could it be? The area around the bite is starting to change color, becoming a dull gray. But as he watches, he realizes to his horror that he's not just watching a color change. This is something more. His dog is slowly petrifying, hardening, her fur stiffening into stone. She is literally turning into a statue right before his eyes. He can't move, but his eyes flick to the corner of the room where his sheep are still standing. Now he understands. It was hard to tell before, because of the darkness and also because the very idea was so preposterous that it didn't even occur to him. But the reason that the sheep were so still and quiet was because they weren't sheep anymore. They were mere statues. Somehow, this creature was able to turn things to stone with the force of its venom. He wants to scream, he wants to yell, he wants to break free and run away, but he's powerless to move. Fear wells up inside him as he sees the creature turn its attention from his rapidly petrifying dog and start to move toward him. It hisses again and strikes out, sinking sharp, needle-like teeth into his leg. The shepherd is so frozen that he can't scream, not even at the unbelievable pain as those teeth sink deep into his flesh. But the pain doesn't stop when the creature retracts its teeth. He can feel the pain spreading outward from the site of the bite, spreading down his shins and up his legs, through his whole body. His body is hardening fast, making it hard to breathe and impossible to move. But even as he turns into a statue, he can still see everything around him, still sense the presence of the creature, still think. His thoughts aren't affected at all, other than being nearly out of his mind with terror. What could be next? The shepherd is frightened, but all he can do is wait. He's not sure how long he waits, because time has no meaning here. In the gloom of this ancient temple, he's not sure if it's day or night. He idly wonders if this temple was built for this monster, by people who worshipped it for its great and terrible power, or by people who feared it, and hoped that maybe this temple would keep it contained. Or is it mere coincidence that it's taken up residence here, just as bats might roost in an abandoned building? He has no way of ever knowing. The only indication of the passage of time is the coming and going of the creature, which, even if he can't turn his head to see its movement, he can hear its shuffling and hissing. Occasionally, he hears a sound that frightens him even more, a sound that can only be described
as statuary shattering, and he wonders if that will ultimately be his fate. His question is answered one day when it seems that hunger has driven the creature to dig into its larder of petrified prisoners. The creature approaches him, and he can feel it gnawing at his feet with its big, ugly beak. It's pecking at him, harder and harder, until suddenly, the shell breaks, and it's chewing on the flesh of his leg. Once again, the pain is unbearable. The shepherd can do nothing but wait. At least he thinks it will all be over soon. Better a quick end at the jaws of a monster than a slow death trapped frozen in stone, he thinks. It's the very best that he can hope for. That shepherd had just run afoul of a creature that appears to come straight out of medieval mythology, matching the description of the deadly monster known as a cockatrice or basilisk, but the SCP Foundation knows it as SCP-1013, a nasty little piece of work with, quite literally, a paralyzing stare. SCP-1013 is a small reptile resembling a lizard, but with several key differences that set it apart from any other animal in this order. It was recovered in Egypt. An interesting coincidence, since medieval bestiaries often regard that region as the ancestral home of the basilisk. However, Foundation agents believe that since no other specimens were found in the area, that SCP-1013 is not a naturally occurring animal and might have actually been bioengineered. While SCP-1013 itself is only 60 centimeters long, its abnormally long tail measures nearly 121 centimeters long. It can use its tail to distract prey. It has a wide frill around its neck that it can extend at will, similar to that of the Australian frilled lizard. Its head does not look like any other known lizard, though, with a serrated beak and a distinctive head wattle that many researchers feel gives it the appearance of a rooster. Its beak is filled with long, needle-like teeth. But stranger than its appearance is its hunting methods. When it spies potential prey, SCP-1013 will extend its neck frill with a sudden, snapping sound. The frill appears designed to attract attention and encourage victims to look into the eyes of SCP-1013, because its eyes are, of course, where it holds its real power. The mythical cockatrice was said to be able to turn a person to stone with the power of its gaze, similar to the petrifying powers attributed to the Gorgon Medusa of Greek mythology, and SCP-1013 is very similar to its legendary namesake in this regard. Anyone or anything making direct eye contact with SCP-1013 will experience stabbing pain in most major muscle groups, followed by full paralysis setting in within 3 seconds and lasting up until 8 minutes. It is currently unknown how SCP-1013 achieves this paralyzing effect. Once its prey is paralyzed, SCP-1013 will bite its victim with its needle-like teeth, thus initiating a process of calcification. The victim will gradually stiffen and harden, almost as if they are turning into a statue. The process will begin at the site of the bite and gradually work its way through the body so that a full-grown adult will become completely calcified within 15 minutes. As of yet, there is no known way to stop or reverse the process. The calcification process only affects the outer layers of the victim, extending about 3 centimeters into the body, leaving all organs and internal tissues intact. It also does not affect the eyes or mucous membranes. This means that victims of SCP-1013 are still alive, but cannot move or react. Perhaps even more horrifying, SCP-1013 then eats its victims alive. SCP-1013 feeds by breaking the hardened outer layer with its beak, much like a young chick would break its way out of an egg, and then feeding on the soft tissues preserved within. The victim will experience excruciating pain as the creature eats them alive, but they cannot resist. They cannot even scream to give voice to their pain. SCP-1013 has a voracious appetite and will consume nearly twice its body weight at each feeding. Victims usually die of blood loss before SCP-1013 can complete its meal. SCP-1013 does engage in caching behavior and has been known to store petrified victims for later consumption. It prefers mammals as prey and will attack livestock and game just as readily as it will attack humans. In times when mammal food sources are not available, desperation may drive SCP-1013 to turn its paralyzing powers on fish, birds, or even insects, but it will only do this if it is near to starving. SCP-1013 is hermaphroditic and, unlike other reptiles, does not reproduce sexually, but instead undergoes a process similar to budding or basic cellular division. Before reproducing, SCP-1013 will increase its feeding, gorging on food and growing rapidly in size. Eventually, it will develop cyst-like structures in its abnormally long tail, each of which contains a juvenile SCP-1013. Juvenile SCP-1013 hatch after only 48 hours.
Parent SCP-1013 will typically release hatchlings within calcified prey, providing a ready food source for the juveniles until they can hunt on their own. Juvenile SCP-1013 will seek out cool, dark places like caves or abandoned buildings and begin rapid molting, doubling in size every 6 hours until reaching full adult size. Once they have reached adulthood, SCP-1013 will set out on their own and quickly establish their own hunting territories. SCP-1013 is extremely aggressive and will attack and attempt to calcify anyone that enters its enclosure, making it extremely difficult to contain. For this reason, combined with its deadly powers of calcification, SCP-1013 has been designated Object Level Keter. Any staff entering the containment area are to wear the AR-68 Armored Variant Hazmat suit. Staff exiting the area with damaged suits are to be remanded to quarantine for 1 hour. Staff becoming paralyzed during cleaning, feeding, or testing cycles are to be immediately removed and remanded to medical custody until 5 hours after recovery. SCP-1013 is to be fed daily with one small mammal. However, any calcified animal remains are to be removed from the 1013 containment chamber and incinerated for safety reasons. 1013 is a frightening reminder that, while many entities have piercing gazes, comparatively few can end your life. Few, however, does not mean zero.
It all started with the roses dying. Only the one bush at first. The old man had come out to water his garden the same way he did every morning. It was looking sad and brown, leaves drooping and branches hardening. Just the one bush in the corner. But the next day, the bushes on either side of it had died too. Within a week, it was that whole corner of the garden. As the old man puts on his gardening gloves at the sink and stares out of the kitchen window, he knows that something is seriously wrong with his poor plants. The flourishing garden, so neatly maintained throughout all of his retirement years, his pride and joy, is now steadily dying before his very eyes. Living in a small one-story house, there isn't much left for him to do. Out in Bushy, right on the edge of what could be considered London, there is very little going on with his day. Inside the house, he hangs all of his photos of the Lancaster bomber that he and his squad flew in the Second World War. Although those days are long behind him now, he chose to live here because on the hill that his house is on, he can see the planes taking off and landing from the nearby RAF base. And where does he like to sit and watch the planes? From his immaculate garden. The old man scowls at it. The perfectly trimmed hedges, blossoming trees, uniform grass, and colorful beds are all being ruined by a dark stain steadily spreading from the back right corner. Starting with that rose bush in the corner and spreading out, everything in a rough circle measuring close to 15 feet is withering away and dying. Not on his watch. The kettle finishes boiling. He has to use his old gas hobs to heat up the water. The cooker is apparently long past its lifespan. The ignition stopped working years ago, so he has to use matches to start it. If he leaves on the gas by accident, well, there wouldn't be much of a kitchen left. He pours the water out into a mug and starts brewing his morning cup of tea. A few minutes later, the back door slides open and the old man emerges, trowel and cup of tea in hand. Years ago, he would have marched purposefully across the grass, but now he is forced to plod instead. His knees and back are both starting to give out from the years of tending to his precious green friends, but the fire is still in his belly. He reaches the edge of the dead patch and looks down. The lawn isn't just yellowing, it's fully brown. He pokes at the grass with his shoe, and it breaks apart to the touch. How strange. He's never seen anything die off so suddenly and uniformly. It isn't just a bad bed or an infection spreading around. It's a clear patch of death where nothing in the given area stands a chance. He steps onto the brown grass and walks to the corner where that first rosebush died. The base of the fence is rotting away in that corner, giving him a peek into his neighbor's garden. With a good deal of groaning and aching, the old man lowers himself onto his hands and knees and peers under the fence. A pair of eyes meet his. The old man yells out in surprise. The person on the other end screams. After a moment, they look under again and start laughing. It's just the mom from next door. She has kids who like to play in the garden on their trampoline while he's working. They'll often talk over the fence to him between bounces. "I hope I didn't give you a heart attack," she teases. He reassures her that he's made of sterner stuff than that. Then they got to the matter at hand. What is going on in their gardens? She's having the same issue too. That same circle is spreading out over her side too. Everything it touches is dying.
"Well then, has to be coming from this corner," the old man says.
A pair of them pull the fence apart around the corner, creating a little hole between their gardens. It's short work. The boards break apart at the lightest touch. Before long, they have a little work site ready. There must be something down in this corner that's causing all of this. Side by side, the old man and the mom from next door start to dig. The soil feels strange to dig through. There's a kind of stickiness to it, as if there's a very faint layer of slime binding it together. Could it be a dead animal? That's the old man's best guess right now, but it doesn't seem very convincing. Surely that would nourish the soil with more nutrients. It might offset the pH balance a bit, but not to the extent of... Crack! The mom's trowel breaks. She holds it up to her face, confused. The metal shovel scoop has broken. The tip of it has fallen off, half snapped, half melted. I just bought this the other day. But the old man isn't looking at the trowel anymore. Instead, he's staring into the hole that the pair of them have dug. Down there at the bottom, underneath the piece of broken metal, something is moving. He plants a gloved hand on either side of the hole and leans down over it, peering at whatever it is. Worms. Tiny brown worms, each writhing and wrapping around the others, tying and untying knots. He straightens up with a groan, takes his gloves off, and pushes himself to his feet. We need to call the council. There's something dead down there that's rotten badly. The woman from Hertzmere Council was clearly not very interested in sending a waste disposal team down when the old man called her. She told him they would stop by the bungalow in 3 to 5 working days and hung up. Several calls later, she relented and agreed they would send a team across that afternoon. Soon after 4 p.m., a knock comes at the door. The old man escorts the waste disposal team around the side entrance, keen for them not to traipse any mud through the house. Clearly annoyed by this, the 2 workmen for the council trudge around the side and out into the garden, grumbling about how they have more important things to be getting on with. The old man chooses to ignore them, leading them to the back corner of his garden and pointing down into the hole he and his neighbor had dug just that morning. Only, the hole is empty. What are we looking at here? One of the workmen grunts. It's a good question. There's nothing at the bottom of the hole. No writhing worms, not even the shard of the trowel. It's just an empty hole. The old man kneels back down by the hole and scoops back the dirt a bit with his own trowel. Nothing. The old man hears words muttered that he hasn't heard since the war as he escorts the 2 gentlemen back to their van. They slam the doors more heavily than necessary and drive off down the quiet suburban street, leaving the man standing confused on his doorstep. The next day, when he goes out to garden, the circle of death hasn't grown. It still looks bad. The plants inside it are clearly dead, but it hasn't spread any further than it was the previous day. The old man sips his tea over the sink and stares out at the garden. It must have been next door. That would be it. Before the council had shown up yesterday, the mom must have come outside and bagged up whatever dead thing was back there and thrown it out herself. Good. He just hopes it doesn't stink up the bin. Now to do the sad part of the task and clear away all of his dead plants. Those rose bushes had been planted the year he moved in. His wife had planted them. As he dons his gloves, the old man feels a wave of sadness wash over. But before he can experience it too deeply, he notices the holes. The tips of his gloves are gone, his fingers poking clean out. In fact, looking down at his trousers, he notices a pair of holes on the knees of them from where he'd been kneeling in the dirt yesterday. A knock at the front door makes him jump. He goes out to see the mom from next door standing anxiously outside his place. She's glancing up and down the street as she talks. She asks if he's seen either of her boys. He shakes his head, hasn't seen them all day. He reassures her it's probably nothing. Back in his day, boys used to go out of the house first thing in the morning and be back for dinner. Parents these days are too sensitive, too anxious. The look on her face tells him that he isn't helping. She mutters something about having seen someone suspicious walking down the street, someone strange. No use worrying about it for now. She heads off in the direction of the local park to go and look for her sons. The old man calls out to her as she leaves, thanking her for sorting out the dead animal from the end of the garden. She looks back at him confused. She hadn't touched it. All the rest of the day, the old man stands by his curtains, twitching them open every now and then to peer out and see if the boys are anywhere to be seen. He's locked all of his doors and left the keys under his pillow, but sunset comes and goes. Nighttime creeps over the suburbs. No children in sight. He's just about to go to bed when he spots someone in the corner of the street. Just outside the glow from the streetlights, the figure lurks over by the street sign. The person moves strangely, taking shaky footsteps and seeming to move slightly aimlessly around the pavement, avoiding the light. He opens the curtain wider and peers outside. His eyes definitely aren't what they used to be. He can't really make out who the person is at all. The safe thing to do is stay inside. A man of his age should make sure not to get involved. But the photo of him standing by his Lancaster on the wall tells him something different. The old man straightens up as best he can and walks over to the front door. He doesn't take a weapon with him. He won't need one. He will go over and talk to this gentleman, ask him what he's doing hanging around this neighborhood at night, and if things go poorly, he'll walk back inside and promptly call the police. The thrill of the confrontation excites him a little. He's missed this. As the cold night air blows against his face, he feels his youthful energy returning to him once again. He calls out to the man on the corner. The shadowy figure stops pacing and slowly turns around to get a better look at him. The old man can tell even from this distance that the gentleman on the street is a good deal taller than him, but that shouldn't matter much. He'll go over, have some stern words, and that'll be that. If this strange man knows anything, it'll be that he should respect his elders. The old man crosses the road and stands under the streetlight, just a few feet away from the man. Frustratingly, his eyes still can't quite make out the man's face. The old man clears his throat and rolls up his sleeves.
Sir, this is a residential neighborhood with young children and an excellent relationship with local law enforcement. I would advise you to move along, or we'll be forced to call the authorities.
But the sound that greets the old man is enough to immediately do away with any of his bravado. His blood runs cold as the figure in front of him starts to laugh. It is a gruff, rasping noise with a slight squelching underneath it. Come to think of it, every little movement this figure makes, there's a little squelch. The laugh stops suddenly, sharply. The figure turns the rest of the way around to face the old man head-on. It takes a step forward. Light falls across it, revealing a mass of wriggling, convulsing worms. Millions of small brown worms all weaving in and out of one another, dripping a thick and sticky liquid onto the street. The creature has no face, no features, no skin, nothing. It has the shape of a man, but that is where the resemblance ends. It is utterly inhuman, utterly terrifying. The old man almost topples backward in surprise, but steadies himself. A fall at his age would be very bad news indeed. The creature reaches out a writhing arm toward him. Liquid drips from it onto the sidewalk. A small puff of gas comes up from it as the liquid bubbles, burning a little dent into the stone. So that's what was killing his roses. Fast as he can, the old man turns and hurries back to his house. He doesn't want to turn around for risk of losing his balance. He'll get inside, lock the door, and call the police. They will know precisely what to do. That squelching sound is behind him, taking shaky, inhuman steps to follow him. The old man reaches the front door and slams it shut. He grabs the landline in the hallway and immediately dials 999, the British emergency number.
Hello? Police, please. There's a gentleman loitering outside my domicile. He appears to be made of worms. Worms, yes. No medication. Just myself.
There's a thud at the door, then a second thud. The old man drops the receiver and takes a few steps back. No more thuds. No more noises. Maybe that was a slight overreaction. The old man straightens up and clears his throat. Nothing to worry about. A sizzling sound fills the hallway. The door starts to look strange. 2 patches are appearing on it, the paint cracking and discoloring. The patches start to bulge outwards, and a drop of liquid seeps through. It falls on the welcome mat and burns a hole clean through it. The old man's eyes widen. Worms. Just 2 or 3 at first, then a few more, then a dozen more, burrow their way through the door, each dripping with that foul liquid. The holes grow larger and larger until the creature has 2 large armholes burnt clear through the wood. The creature grips what remains of the door with its wormed fingers and wrenches the wood apart. It towers over the old man as it stands in the doorway, its surface crawling and wriggling as its feet burn holes into the carpet. The book hits the creature square in the chest, knocking it off balance. The old man throws another book and another. He knew it was a good idea to keep his bookshelf out in the hallway. He grabs another, but hesitates and puts it back, not the first editions. Instead, he heaves the old yellow pages in both of his hands and launches it as hard as he can at the worm monster. The book smacks into its chest with enough force to break a chunk of it apart. The creature's chest bursts open, sending worms flying through the air. Something red falls out onto the carpet. A baseball cap. A child's baseball cap, half digested. The old man gasps and puts a hand to his mouth. The worms splattered against the wall start to slide down towards the carpet, eating through the wallpaper as they go. Once on the ground, they start to crawl and wriggle back over to their body, reabsorbing into the mass from the feet. The creature straightens up like nothing ever happened. He's going to need more than books. Hello? It's the mom from next door. The old man's eyes widen further. "I saw your door was still open. I was just wondering if you've seen..." The mom appears in the front doorway just behind the monster, takes one look up at it, and freezes. She has a rusty old Zippo with a dim flame to light her way. The wormed mass turns round to her. In the same rasping voice that it laughed with earlier, it says one word. Her name. Then it notices something and flinches slightly, the lighter in her hand. For a second, the old man, the mom from next door, and the giant worm monster all look at the tiny little flame. Then it goes out. The creature lunges at her, grabbing her by the shoulders and wrenching her into a ferocious hug. The smell of dissolving flesh fills the hallway as she screams in agony. The old man does everything he can not to throw up. He needs to get out of the house. The back door. He'll go out the back while the creature eats. Step by step, he creeps away from the distracted monstrosity next to his coat rack, trying his best not to be heard. He slides the kitchen door closed and puts a chair against the handle. It's not much, but it'll buy him a few seconds. He turns, rushing to the glass sliding doors at the back of the house, and reaches for the key on the side. Only, it's gone. Of course, he left all the keys under his pillow. The pillow in the bedroom that's right next to... His shoulders slump. He turns back around and sees a crack of light under the kitchen door. A couple of worms are crawling their way under it, gathering together and starting to form on the tiles. That's it then. It's all over. Nothing left for it. The old man lets his eyes wander around the room. That creature is making its way into this kitchen no matter what he does. All he has are a few precious seconds until those worms are big enough to come after him. He wants to spend those seconds the right way. Feeling his ragged breathing starting to find a steadier rhythm, he walks over to that old picture on the wall. Him and his crew, all his best friends, standing young and proud in front of their bomber. He'd experienced this feeling before this moment. When you know that your demise is guaranteed, it removes some of the panic, the uncertainty of, will I make it? What can I do? Do I have a chance? It's a sickly thing. It leaves you in the lurch, trying desperately to battle against your own nerves. Once it's decided, however, well, then everything becomes a lot clearer. He'd felt this way in the war, when their bomber was shot at while flying over occupied France. They were steadily losing altitude and airspeed as they crossed back over the channel. The 7 of them had each taken a quiet moment to say their prayers and look out at the stars flitting above them. Only, they hadn't died. In fact, they were all being incredibly foolish. The solution was so simple that when the old man's rear gunner suggested they just drop all their remaining bombs onto the water to save weight, the group of them had all burst out laughing. One by one, the bombs dropped silently into the sea. They're probably still down there to this day. No explosions. Explosions. The old man smiles. Maybe it's not quite over after all. He looks back at the ball of worms assembling on his kitchen floor. As more worms crawl under the door and join the mass, it takes on different strange shapes. First a mouse, then a rabbit, a cat, dog. In a moment, it'll be the size of a hog. Rushing over to his gas stovetop, he twists all 4 of the dials all the way up. They whine and hiss at him, spewing acrid-smelling gas into the air. Already his head starts to swim. He'll have to time this just right. He snatches the trowel and a box of matches up off the countertop and goes to the sliding glass door. This is it. Rasping laughter fills the room as the creature stands to its full height, head almost brushing against the ceiling. The old man can feel himself losing consciousness from all the gas in the room. Bang! He slams the trowel against the glass door. Nothing. Bang! He does it again, still hopeless. The laughter grows louder as he hears squelching footsteps behind him. Bang! This time there's a slight chip. He hits it again and again, trying his best to shatter it, but while the little chip grows into a crack, it's not working. A warm, squishy mass smothers his shoulder. Worms burrow into his flesh, searing white-hot pain throughout his body. That'll have to do. The old man strikes the match. Boom! Glass shatters, flames bloom out of the house, licking the last remaining healthy flowers. Burning worms fly in all different directions, scattered across the lawn, the back fence, and beyond. The old man thuds onto his back, looking up at the billowing smoke making its way up towards the stars, as the scared worms burrow their way back into the ground. He would never understand the monster that attacked him that night. Thankfully, this is where I come in. There is something about fire that unlocks this primal fear in almost all living creatures, and SCP-906 is no different. Nicknamed the Scouring Hive, SCP-906 is the blanket designation for a supercolony of worm-like invertebrates that appear to share a semi-advanced hive mind. The individual worms are dark brown in color and appear to have some level of shared intelligence. When separated from the colony, the worms will crawl towards its general direction but demonstrate a reduced level of problem-solving capabilities. However, once they are back as part of the group, the Scouring Hive is a formidable predator. When hungry, this SCP becomes acutely aggressive, secreting a viscous, highly corrosive acid that can eat through flesh, hair, bones, and clothing alarmingly quickly. Capable of adapting its form to mimic other animals and humans, this SCP seems to find a level of thrill in the chase. Able to parrot a very rudimentary estimation of human speech, it can say names and even laugh, which it often does while pursuing its prey. It is theorized that this ability to impersonate others is used to lure subjects into dangerous situations, like young children playing alone in their garden, hearing a strange noise from over the fence. While it can take various forms, the Scouring Hive is at its most lethal when it chooses to attack directly. Taking the form of a kind of carpet of worms, it flows across the ground quickly, climbing surfaces, squeezing through narrow gaps, and finding creative solutions to stalk otherwise inaccessible targets. It has been known to swarm through various circuitous routes like drain pipes and air vents while on the hunt. Once it has reached its prey, it envelops them, coating them in that acidic secretion that rapidly breaks down living tissue into a slurry for the worms to consume. While it is unclear whether this is a genuine reaction or just another instance of parroting, this SCP seems to enjoy gloating at this stage, laughing at and mocking its prey as it consumes it. How a colony of worms has reached this level of cognition is unknown. While tougher than your average garden worms, the Scouring Hive is not invincible. Susceptible to incineration, freezing, and full-body disintegration, SCP-906 can be neutralized if the need should ever arise. When under existential threat, the colony will begin to undergo a period of rapid reproduction. As long as just a handful of worms survive, the colony is able to rebuild itself quickly. That is why SCP-906 is currently held in secure storage in a 3x3 meter fully airtight, acid-resistant box. It is kept at a constant 5 degrees Celsius. At this cool temperature, SCP-906 operates at a much reduced capacity, consuming less food, reproducing at a reduced rate, and moving slowly. Should that temperature ever increase, all SCP personnel are to evacuate immediately and ready themselves to terminate any worms they see with flamethrowers and liquid nitrogen. While this supercolony is currently contained, it is unknown whether more instances of these worms exist outside of the Foundation walls, slowly burrowing their way through the dirt towards one another until they have enough to start to feed.
The full moon hangs heavy in the night sky over the dense jungle canopy. Below, the darkened palm trees stand silent in the humid air, festooned with vines and lianas, and tropical insects hum in the undergrowth. The night is quiet and dark here, far from the city, in one of the farthest, most secluded provinces of the Philippines. One would hardly expect anyone to be out at this time of night. The young woman is hurrying home, carrying a lantern before her face so that she can see where she's going in the pitch black of the night. Her swollen belly reveals that she's at least several months pregnant, her new middle throwing her off balance just enough that she has to be careful not to stumble. A woman in her condition, she thinks, shouldn't be out at this time of night, and certainly shouldn't have to do household chores like this. But the work has to get done, no matter what. She carries a basket of wet laundry under her other arm. She is returning from washing her clothes in the river, and if she had planned things out better, she would have been home long before the moon rose. Unfortunately, she spent far too much time gossiping with several other village women before getting to work on scrubbing her filthy clothes against the rocks. Luckily, it's not too far from the river back to her home in the village. The worst thing that might happen, she reminds herself, is that she might lose her footing in the dark and trip over a rock or a root. There's no chance that she might run afoul of some nocturnal animal, she tells herself, even though the sudden chills down her spine and sweat dripping from her brow reveals the truth, that she doesn't believe that at all, and, in fact, she's getting more and more nervous as she staggers through the dark. It isn't just the threat of wild animals. She remembers the stories that her mother told her when she was a little girl, all about sinister supernatural monsters that live in these woods. Of course, those are just stories invented to scare children, she tells herself. She's a grown woman now, about to have a child of her own. She shouldn't be worried about boogeymen. She just needs to keep her head on her shoulders, and she'll be sure to arrive home safely. The lantern throws its light over a figure standing below the crook of a catmon tree. The woman jolts, nearly dropping her laundry. She gulps back a scream as she realizes that what she sees isn't a wild animal, but rather a person. "Oh, sorry," says the young woman, her voice shaking a little. "I didn't think anyone else was still out this late. I thought you were a wild animal." "Don't you worry, little one," says the figure in a soft, sibilant voice. The figure steps forward, and the young woman recognizes her. It's an old woman from the village, her back hunched and her long white hair falling over her shoulders in a messy tangle. The young woman feels inexplicably nervous running into this particular villager here in the jungle at night. Many of the village kids whisper that she's actually a witch who has all kinds of weird supernatural powers. Even some of the village elders are afraid to cross her for fear of getting cursed. "Where are you going at this hour? Someone in your condition shouldn't exert yourself so much." "I'm just heading home," says the young woman, hefting the basket of laundry for emphasis. "It's dangerous to be out so late alone. Here, let me walk home with you. There's safety in numbers, you know." Thank you." The young woman almost wants to protest that she doesn't need any help getting home because she really does not want to spend any more time with this old woman. But at the same time, she is reluctant to say anything that might insult her. After all, even if the young woman doesn't believe in witchcraft, it's not like she wants to take any chances. Besides, the truth is that she is rather frightened of being alone in the dark, and any company is better than nothing, even if it's this strange old woman. "How far along are you, honey?" says the old woman, placing a hand against the surface of the young woman's protruding belly. The young woman grimaces. She doesn't like this old woman intruding on her personal space like this. The old woman's hands are wrinkled and veiny, flecked with liver spots, and her fingers topped with gnarled talons. The young woman wants to cry out at the sight of them, but she bites her tongue. Instead, she answers the old woman's probing question as calmly and politely as she can. Very nice, says the old woman, her rheumy eyes never straying from the young woman's belly, and her hands still rubbing against her stomach as if she's trying to reach something within. The old woman makes a strange sound in her throat, like she's smacking her lips in hunger, but it's hard to see anything in the dark. The young woman can only nod in confusion, but she quickens her pace. She hopes that she can get home soon, and once she's home, she can get away from her unfortunate travel companion. The old woman keeps pace, grabbing her younger traveling companion by the arm and holding tight. Her grip is surprisingly firm for such a seemingly frail old woman, and the young woman again wonders if maybe there's something supernatural about this ominous crone. She wants to pull her arm away, but the old woman's long claws pinch cruelly into her flesh. It's as if the old woman is silently warning her, "Don't pull away. I'm too strong for you to escape." "What a sweet little bundle of joy you carry there," says the old woman, as if speaking to herself. "What a delectable little burden." The young woman knows that she's still talking about her unborn baby, but all this mumbling just makes her more worried. They continue walking, the young woman staring resolutely at the small circle of illumination thrown by her lantern onto the path ahead, doing everything in her power to not look at the old woman standing at her side, for fear that she might scream. Why is she so nervous? Worse, does the old woman sense her fear? The young woman has heard that witches are easily offended, and that's the last thing that she needs now. She continues walking, the old woman gibbering and whispering in her ear, plying her with odd questions about her pregnancy. "Eating well, have you? You know it's very important to eat right when you're carrying, so that the baby can be born strong and healthy." "Right," says the young woman. She really doesn't need this unsolicited advice. She heaves an audible sigh of relief as the village comes into view over the next bluff. Thank God, she thinks, I'm almost home. She just hopes that the old woman will take a hint and leave her alone once they arrive at her doorstep. She wonders if this old woman might try to come into her home or maybe steer her towards some other destination. But what can she do? All she can do is keep walking home and hope for the best. "Is it just you, is it? Is the father in the picture, I haven't seen you with any young men lately, have I?" asks the old woman. Her nosiness is really starting to irritate the young woman, enough that she almost forgets her fear. "No, it's just me," says the young woman automatically. She immediately regrets that confession. What is this old woman planning? Is she up to some mischief? Now she knows that the young woman lives alone, and there won't be anyone around to see whatever this crone is planning. Her grip tightens on the young woman's arm as if to warn her again. The village is quiet and dark. Everyone else has already gone to bed by now, so So the pair of them walk down narrow, still streets. The only sound is the crunch, crunch, crunch of gravel under their feet. After what seems like an eternity, they arrive at the front gate of the young woman's house. "Well, here I am," she says, a little too loudly and firmly to be completely casual. "This is my home. Thanks for keeping me company on my way home." To her immense relief, the old woman lets go of her arm. The young woman immediately pulls away, rubbing the deep bruises left by the old woman's gnarled talons. "Think nothing of it, my dear." The old woman smiles widely, a long rope of saliva dribbling from her slack lips. Her teeth look jagged and misshapen. It's hard to see in the dark, but they look more like the teeth of a wild beast than a human. It must be your eyes playing tricks on her in the dim light, though. The young woman can't help but recoil in disgust, but luckily her face is hidden in shadows, so the old woman doesn't seem to notice. "I'm happy to help. I hope to see you again very soon." The young woman doesn't wait any longer. Even before the old woman turns to leave, the young woman scampers across her yard and yanks open her door. She runs inside and pulls the door shut behind her. Her heart is racing, and her breath comes in ragged pants. She can feel the baby in her belly kick, suddenly agitated by its mother's fear. "Shh, it's okay," she coos softly, patting her stomach and hoping that her tender voice will help to calm her baby. "I know you're scared. I'm scared too. That old woman frightened me half to death. They say that she's a witch, and I'd almost believe it. What a strange experience." She pulls the curtain aside and peeps out the window. The old woman is gone. The young woman looks up and down the street, but sees no sign of her traveling companion. She inhales deeply and feels the tension drain from her body as she lets her breath out. Thank goodness that's all over. She can't explain why this whole night has unnerved her so much, but there was just something so uncanny about that strange old woman. She's glad to be rid of her. The young woman tries to put the whole experience out of her head as she prepares for bed. As she pulls on her nightclothes, she startles when she hears something heavy and loud clatter across the roof. It's not unusual for roof rats or other nocturnal animals to scurry across the roof at night, but this sounds louder than usual. "It's probably nothing," she tells herself as she climbs into bed. "I'm still just upset about meeting that old woman on my way home from the river. That whole thing must have jangled my nerves worse than I thought if I'm flinching at every little sound. I'll be fine when it's light out. The sooner I get to sleep, the sooner it'll be morning." Even though her nerves are rattled, she is quite tired after a long day, and it doesn't take long before she drifts off to sleep. The young woman's eyes close, and her breathing becomes slow and steady, the shallow rhythms of sleep. Inside her head, she might be troubled by strange dreams, but to any outside observer, she is dead to the world. Asleep in bed, she doesn't react to the clattering on the roof. Whatever is up there is making an awful racket as it drags itself over the roof tiles. If someone were around to watch, they would see that whatever is on the roof is no rat. It's a darkened figure, almost big enough to be human, but strangely truncated. Two massive leathery wings unfurl behind it, extended to help the strange creature maintain its balance upon the roof. It drags itself forward using only its hands, long talons tapping at the roof shingles as it seeks a loose tile, anything that will give it access to the house below. Its finger finds a crack. Wheezing and panting, the creature leans forward, putting its eye to the crack to peer into the room below. The young woman is asleep in bed directly below, and that's exactly what this creature was hoping for. The young woman mumbles in her sleep, her mind filled with disturbing dreams. She's oblivious when, all of a sudden, something drops through that crack in the ceiling. It's long and slippery and covered in thick, wet mucus. It looks, for all the world, like a tongue, but it's far too long to be any human tongue. It drops lower and lower into the room, extending closer and closer to the young woman sleeping in her bed. The disgusting appendage caresses her face, leaving a wet slug trail of saliva across her forehead, as if it's looking for something, then brushes against her lips, and the tongue seems to find what it wants. Instantly, it snakes into her open mouth and shoots down her throat. The young woman starts to sputter and choke, her limbs thrashing and flailing, but still, she is held fast in the grip of sleep. Some wild nightmare is playing out in her head. Perhaps she fantasizes that she is drowning in a river or choking on some food or being strangled by a fiend. Whatever she's thinking, it couldn't be further from the truth, that an alien tongue has jammed itself down her throat. The tongue pushes deeper and deeper inside her until it makes contact with her womb. A trained anatomist might balk at the idea that the tongue could find her womb by accessing her throat, but somehow it has done exactly this, snaking its way through the labyrinth of her insides to find her unborn baby. A sticky aperture opens up at the tip of the tongue, revealing that the tongue is hollow, like a massive soda straw. It sucks up the baby like a vacuum, slurping it up, and out. The bulge of its prey traveling up the length of the tongue like a wild pig swallowed by a boa constrictor. Once the baby is gone, the tongue slides out of the woman's mouth and retracts back toward the ceiling, disappearing back through the subtle crack. There's a clatter on the roof again, followed by the soft flutter of leathery wings. The young woman settles back into a deep, still sleep, the awful sensation of suffocation having passed. The rest of the night is peaceful and quiet, but when she awakens the next morning, she finds that the nightmare isn't over. She wakes with a strange empty feeling in her guts. Something is very wrong. She throws aside her covers and stares at herself in shock. Her baby is gone. Her rounded belly has deflated back to its pre-pregnancy state, and she can sense, as only a mother can, that she is no longer carrying something within her. She shrieks in terror at this bizarre revelation. What could have happened? What could be responsible? That young woman just had an encounter with SCP-5201. SCP-5201 is a humanoid subspecies native to the Philippines, dubbed Homo sapiens visceralis, but known by many local names across the Philippine Islands, including the Aswang, the Tik-Tik, or simply the Viscera Sucker. But it is most commonly known as the Manananggal. During the day, an instance of SCP-5201 looks like an ordinary human. At a glance, there is no way to immediately distinguish an instance of SCP-5201 from a regular member of Homo sapiens. However, Foundation researchers have found that there do exist certain retinal irregularities unique to SCP-5201, so the agency has developed a portable retinal scanner for use in quickly identifying instances of SCP-5201. SCP-5201 is far easier to tell from an ordinary human at night when it undergoes a strange and startling metamorphosis. It unfolds a pair of membranous wings, resembling those of a bat, from its back. Even more startling, its torso splits in two. Its upper torso then flies off in search of prey, while its lower torso is hidden in a secure location until SCP-5201 can reconnect. SCP-5201 will seek out human prey, most likely relying on a keenly attuned sense of smell, and, once it has chosen a victim, will alight on the roof of their home and then snake its preternaturally long, tube-like tongue into the house below so that it can feed. SCP-5201 feeds by inserting its tongue into the orifices of unfortunate sleepers and sucking out their internal organs as easily as you would suck soda through a straw. SCP-5201 will happily eat human livers, stomachs, and intestines, but its favorite food is unborn fetuses. So much so that instances of SCP-5201 disguised in their human form can often be recognized by their tendency to drool at the sight of pregnant women. SCP-5201 are well known to local humans who live in fear of nocturnal attacks by the dreaded Manananggal. Interestingly, SCP-5201 can be repelled by Abrahamic holy objects like rosary beads or crucifixes, or can be staked through the heart with sharpened shafts of bamboo, very similar to the means used against vampires in Western folklore. SCP-5201 is especially vulnerable when its upper torso is out hunting, so it will always take the utmost care to hide its abandoned lower torso in a secret, secure location. If you can find the hidden lower torso, it is possible to kill SCP-5201 by sprinkling its exposed viscera with spices like garlic, salt, or vinegar, or failing that, even ash or urine. This causes an unusual reaction that is not yet fully understood by Foundation researchers, but will prevent the two halves from rejoining. If the two halves of the Manananggal cannot rejoin before dawn, sunlight will kill the creature. If none of these methods are available, it is also possible to repel SCP-5201 by using a specialized whip fashioned from the tail of a stingray. The SCP Foundation currently has an undisclosed number of domesticated SCP-5201 instances held in the Fauna Containment Wing of Site-235. Because this species has been known to practice cannibalism, each specimen is to be held in its own personal containment cell. While there are obvious ethical and logistical concerns with feeding human organs to SCP-5201, the Foundation has discovered that SCP-5201 can still easily thrive on a diet of any newborn mammal with a mass of at least 1 kilogram. Piglets have so far proven to be the most cost-effective and available options, but other species can be substituted as necessary. All entrances to SCP-5201 containment cells are to be guarded by at least 2 Level 2 personnel equipped with stingray whips, crucifixes, or some other object found to cause harm to SCP-5201. Unlike humans, SCP-5201 have an unusual asexual reproductive process. The lower body can regenerate a new upper torso via a process similar to epimorphic regeneration observed in autonomous lizards. Upper torso of an SCP-5201 would leave behind the parent's lower torso to search for a compatible female human. SCP-5201 would attack and consume this human, claiming her lower torso as its own. Smearing ash, urine, or spices into the exposed innards of the lower torso inhibits this process and prevents effective reproduction. The exact origin of SCP-5201 is unknown, although the creature is endemic throughout the Philippines, and historical records indicate that it has inhabited the island since at least 1500, when it was first described by Spanish sailors to the islands. Fossil remains and genetic testing indicate that it is actually an invasive species from outside the Philippine archipelago. SCP-5201 is currently believed to be extinct in the wild, following eradication efforts by the Foundation in the 1990s. An epidemic of SCP-5201 attacks in the early 90s prompted the SCP Foundation to join forces with the Supernatural Committee of the Philippines and the Global Occult Coalition to take action to prevent SCP-5201 from spreading to other countries. Dubbed Project Dipsy, the operation involved amnesticizing the major cities of the Philippines, funding propaganda campaigns to dismiss SCP-5201 as a product of folklore and urban legends, and eventually domesticating the surviving SCP-5201 population for cellular regeneration research. Because of its aggressiveness and taste for human flesh, SCP-5201 specimens regularly attempt to breach containment, and thus have been given the designation Euclid. And while the SCP Foundation has done its best to eliminate the threat of SCP-5201 in the wild, there's no guarantee that a few instances of this vicious monster might have slipped through the cracks and possibly even spread out into the wider world beyond its home in the Philippines. You still might want to search your room for any suspicious cracks or holes before you bed down for the night, because there are very few things less pleasant than waking up from restless dreams to find a long, slimy tongue jammed down your throat.
Papers fly up in the air in every direction as the office workers run for their lives. The PA, brand new at her job, can't figure out where on earth the emergency exit is. She tries every door, but they are either locked or go nowhere. The vast office maze, uncanny in its complexity, stretches along endless hallways and old directories. At the end of the corridor, right in front of her, is a door with a touch bar on it. That will surely be a fire escape, a way for her to get away from the monster. She throws her whole body weight against the bar and tumbles through the door, landing in a janitor's closet. No way out except back. Lying there, sprawled amongst the mops and cleaning products, the PA rolls over and stares back down the corridor. Somehow, she still holds the Starbucks iced latte in her hand. A forked tongue appears around the corner, followed by a flattened nose, long razor-like teeth, and a pair of blank, reptile eyes. The hulking anaconda winds its way along the carpets, licking the air, tasting the scent of the PA's perfume. She is powerless, lying there crouched in the cramped janitor's closet as the enormous snake slithers towards her. It rears up tall as a human and bares its fangs. The PA closes her eyes and readies herself for the inevitable bite. The knife and fork land on the table with a loud enough clatter to make all the other patrons turn. A large man with a bushy beard spills tomato soup down his chest, while a snooty food reviewer chokes on the seafood she's just been trying to swallow. A woman, shaking with rage, screams into her phone. "Next time you'll get my order right. It's a caramel oat milk latte with 8 ice cubes. No, I don't care that one of them melted. It's not good enough." In her venomous tirade, she threatens the job, life, and even the family of whoever she's talking to. The woman slams her phone down on the table loudly enough to make everyone in the restaurant jump again. This time, one of the waitstaff spills an entire tray of drinks over a table of guests. The commotion is loud enough to make the woman's fury shift in their direction. "Excuse me, I'm trying to conduct business here. Could you please not be so rude?" Stalking into the head office of Louis Vuitton, the woman walks so fast that the brand new assistant following her struggles to catch up. The PA is still signing her contract of employment as they go, doing her best to multitask as she lists off her boss's itinerary. Design meeting from 1 to 1:30, yoga with a personal trainer from 1:30 to 1:45, then into an urgent meeting to get ahead of the latest animal cruelty scandal. The woman struggles to keep track of which issue her colleagues are complaining about this time.
It could be the animal testing from the perfume line, the snakeskin rug they've just had to discontinue, or the polar bear scarf they've just announced for the winter collection. She can sense the headache coming on already. The new PA hands her an iced coffee as they get into the elevator. She takes a sip and decides she doesn't even want it, throwing it in the trash as soon as they reach her floor. She's just about to launch into a rant about animal activists and their oversensitivity when the smell hits her. Opening the door to her office, she's punched in the face by the stench of rotting fish. Lying on the floor of her office is a 600-pound tuna fish staring blankly at the ceiling. The woman is so shocked that, for once, she stops yelling and just stares in surprise. In her 35 years in New York, never once has anyone so much as said the word no to her, let alone pulled a stunt like this. She turns around to face her personal assistant and asks for her name. It's Melanie. The poor girl is terrified. She asks Melanie why there's a fish in her office, and before the girl can even muster up a reply, the heartless corporate overlord fires her on the spot. She hadn't even signed her contract yet. Once Melanie the PA leaves the room, the woman finds herself alone with the giant tuna, her anger simmering. Looking down at the dead animal, she sees a crumpled mess of cream-colored silicone under it, along with a few wet articles of clothing. Using the tip of her cigarette holder, she pulls at the crumpled silicone to try and extract it from under the fish. Strange. It looks almost like one of those human masks you buy at a Halloween store, except it's a full suit. In fact, it looks remarkably similar to her head of innovation and product design. Lying on the floor next to it is something small and innocent looking. It's part of a zipper, broken by the looks of it. The black metal is slightly bent out of shape and worn away at the edges. It looks cheap and used, not the kind of material one would expect to see anywhere within a 5-mile radius of this office. She picks up the zipper and rolls it between her fingers. Her headache is back. She needs a coffee. Pressing the intercom button, she demands that her new PA immediately go out and get one, forgetting that she'd just fired her a few moments earlier. Walking over to the window of her top-floor office, she looks down at the crowds of animal rights protesters' stories and stories below, rolling the zipper between her fingers the whole time. Her thumb is itching slightly. Looking down at the metal tab in frustration, the woman sees that the zipper has somehow embedded itself into her skin. Puzzled, she leans in close for a better look, going a little cross-eyed. She couldn't have been squeezing it that hard, could she? Tentatively, the woman tries to pull the zipper out, but it just tugs at her skin, not budging at all. A faint sense of panic starts to well up in her chest. She pulls at it again, trying her best to dislodge it from her flesh, but it won't move. Then a second idea pops into her brain. What if she just... The woman slides the zipper down along the length of her thumb. It glides smoothly, feeling just like the one you'd use to open your raincoat. Except, as it travels along her thumb, the skin itself seems to separate and flop apart, leaving a dark, empty space inside. The layers of her skin peel back as if they're made of rubber, and a flow of steam hisses out from the gap in her thumb. The zipper reaches the palm of her hand, and her thumb dangles there limply, empty, as if nothing had ever been inside of it. Her eyes widen with amazement. She continues to slide the zipper across her palm, up her wrist, and towards her elbow. As it goes, that gentle waft of steam continues to escape from the gap, exposing a row of metal teeth. She can't stop. The zipper glides up her bicep and towards her shoulder. In one final move, she slides it directly across her collarbone and falls to the ground, lifeless. The pile of empty skin sits crumpled on the floor of her office. For several seconds, nothing moves. Then, the middle of the skin shifts slightly, almost as if something inside it had moved. The same happens again and again, just as the woman's newest PA arrives with a nice coffee held proudly in her hands. Why is it so dark in here? What's happened to the lights? She must have had an episode. She doesn't remember falling over, but here she is on the ground in total darkness. The only thing she could recall was hallucinating that zipper. The woman shuffles this way and that, trying to get her bearings. She attempts to put an arm out to lift herself up, but can't. She tries her other arm. Again, nothing. No movement at all. Come to think of it, she can't even feel her arm. Maybe a leg? No luck there either. She must have hit her head pretty hard on the ground when she landed. Perhaps she's got a concussion. The woman does her best to sit up straight, and finds that it's actually quite easy. Her back arches and curves effortlessly, twisting at whatever angle she wants. All of that yoga must have been paying off. All of a sudden, she's dimly aware of a light in front of her. What's the old cliche they always say in movies? Don't go towards it? Screw that. The light in front of her is the only thing she can see right now. Without thinking about it, the woman stretches her neck forward and finds that it moves easily and surprisingly far. She must be concussed. It feels like she's almost gliding in any direction she wants. She simply moves her head, and she finds her whole body drifting in that direction effortlessly. That spot of light she was looking at? It's not some mystical end-of-the-tunnel situation. It's a gap in whatever material has been covering her. The woman pokes her head out and takes in a breath of fresh air, doing her best to shrug off the rest of the bundle of whatever it was that she'd been buried inside. Was it silicone? She turns her head to look back at it and jumps at the sight. She'd been inside of one of those silicone costumes, the same as the other one under the tuna that had been in her office, except this one. She had seen that face millions of times on magazine covers, plastered across billboards in her selfie camera, and in the mirror at home. She's looking at the crumpled husk of herself. A scream fills her head, and she darts her gaze around suddenly to see a PA standing in the doorway, with a nice latte trembling in her hand. Yes, some good news. The woman opens her mouth to talk to the PA, but the words don't come. She tries her best to squeeze her lungs and articulate her vocal cords, but the best she can manage is a soft hissing sound. That's when she spies her reflection in the mirror on the wall and sees the dead reptilian eyes and enormous curved fangs of an anaconda looking back at her. Pandemonium fills the office of Louis Vuitton as the anaconda weaves its way around the corridors, passing the reception desk and through the break room, approaching anyone it finds and asking for help. The snake tries its best to look very calm and innocent, assuring people that it poses no threat to them. However, that's a very difficult thing to do when every time it opens its mouth, all anybody can see is a set of enormous teeth pointing straight at them. Within a couple of minutes, everybody seems to have evacuated, leaving the snake on her own, winding her way through the corridors, trying her best not to panic. That's when she spies her PA lying helpless in the janitor's closet. Relief washes over her as she sees that the girl has nowhere to run. This should be easy to talk to her then. The snake rushes over and stands tall, looking down at the girl. She opens her mouth, leans in close, and takes the iced latte from the girl's hand. Placing the cup gently on the carpet, the snake slurps a bit of the coffee through the straw. It's absolutely vile, clashing horribly with the hypersensitive taste receptors on her tongue. She tries to spit it out, but discovers that snakes have very different mouth anatomy than hers, and that motion isn't so easy. Besides, she realizes if she's going to have any hope of convincing this girl of who she really is, taking a drink from that Starbucks cup is probably her best chance to do it. Coiling herself up to look as small as possible, the snake sips away at the coffee and looks at the PA in what she hopes is a reassuring way. Very slowly, she can see the cogs starting to turn in the girl's face as she realizes what's happened. Reaching into her handbag, the PA, in shaking hands, pulls out a notebook and a pen and offers them to the snake. It's slow progress and takes a lot of work, but eventually, the snake is able to get enough control over the motor functions of its tail to grip the pen and scribble out a few words, just before the pest control team arrives and tranquilizes her. For 3 weeks, the anaconda is locked up in the Animal Control Center in New York City. The center wasn't equipped for dealing with giant snakes, so they ended up putting her in the largest dog holding pen they had, which only just about fits her if she coils up in the right way. 3 times a day, one of the keepers will toss her slabs of raw meat. She'd always been a fan of a rare steak. Little did she know just how enjoyable a raw one could be. Aside from mealtimes, she's miserable, doing everything she can to communicate to the workers there that she's really a sentient woman. Not only a sentient woman, but also the head of one of the world's largest high-fashion brands. She quickly discovers she's talking to a brick wall, or rather, hissing up one. The more she thinks about it, the more her situation reminds her of some of the photos that had been passed across her desk over the prior few months at various planning meetings. Photos from undercover journalists who had visited her company's factory in the Far East and discovered cages upon cages of live animals locked up, either to be killed for their skin or to be hosed down with chemicals to see if they develop a rash. It was lying there on the floor that she discovered that snakes don't have tear ducts. She would have liked it if they did. Maybe that way, she'd be able to get some of her emotions out. The Foundation moved quickly as soon as the news story broke. Agents were in and out of the office within hours. The Zipper was placed into a sealed bag and transported directly to Site-64, where it has since remained in a standard-issue locker. A series of testing sessions were established to ascertain exactly how SCP-3660 functioned. As soon as the Zipper is pressed against the skin of a human being, it embeds itself. Test subjects report no feelings of pain and discomfort, just confusion. That's how the Zipper has been able to press itself in so deep. Only a handful of subjects have reported feeling a slight itching sensation and the desire to pull at the tab to relieve that feeling. It sits just below the layer of the skin, in the same way that it would on a jacket or hoodie. If left untouched within 10 minutes, SCP-3660 will activate on its own accord, sliding steadily along the subject's skin and unzipping them. As this happens, the subject is instantaneously, and again without pain, transfigured into an animal. This process occurs internally beneath the layer of skin as it unzips. According to the basic laws of physics, a transformation this drastic and quick would require enormous amounts of energy, and so researchers expected to find heat and pressure levels high enough to instantly boil the blood of the subject. However, the only abnormal thermal readings came from a slight hiss of steam escaping the gap in the skin as it unzips. The new opening of the skin is now lined with a row of metal teeth on either side, as the skin itself appears to be transformed into a slightly different texture and material. Researchers note that the empty skin of the test subject looks and feels somewhat uncanny. Test samples taken into the lab reveal that the complex carbon-based multicellular organ has somehow been transmuted into consistent silicone rubber. Several tests involved placing the D-Class personnel atop a weighing scale, and researchers were shocked to see enormous and rapid fluctuations in weight depending on the animal that the subject was transformed into. Transformed is the correct word to use here. The animal that emerges from the opening in the skin is not an entirely new life form. It is difficult to build a method of communication with every creature that emerges from the testing process. Since the animal created seems to be largely random, they can often pose real challenges in terms of setting up a method for feedback on how the test went. For example, 3 subjects have been transmuted into various species of squid, which had to be quickly rushed to an aquatic test chamber before drying out. Once inside these test chambers, while the squids were evidently very intelligent, they lacked the motor skills and limbs to be able to form any kind of sign language or even point out letters on a board. Great apes, however, have proven much easier to work with, as they can quickly adopt sign language and even attempt rudimentary vowel sounds with their throats. What is clear from this testing is that the animal that emerges retains the memories of the person it has replaced. It has the same attachment to loved ones, the same fears, and the same idiosyncrasies. Or at least it does when these things do not come into conflict with the animal's biological nature. One test subject, for example, had always had a strong affection for hamsters. However, when that test subject emerged from the pile of silicone skin as a sparrowhawk, it had a markedly different relationship with them, something that it expressed guilt over for the duration of testing. Try as it might, however, the hawk could not fight its urge to feed on the hamsters whenever it was offered the opportunity. Similar tendencies can be noticed in animals' mating behaviors. A survey of the test subjects revealed that 94.7% of male species reported resisting the urges of feeding and breeding to be the aspect most difficult to control in their new form. From all of the testing conducted thus far, only amniotes, cephalopods, and chondrichthyans have been observed emerging from the test subjects' empty skin sacs. Testing is ongoing to determine if there is a set pattern to the animals emerging, although thus far, no pattern has been observed. One particularly memorable test saw a blue whale emerge from the body of one of the D-Class personnel, causing significant damage to the testing facilities as the room had not been constructed with that large of a creature in mind. Since then, testing has been temporarily suspended, as the Foundation discovered that one of the senior researchers was underreporting the level of testing being conducted and quickly turning Site-64 into the SCP petting zoo for highly gifted animals. Fortunately, the head of Louis Vuitton and her PA managed to get in contact with the SCP Foundation. Or rather, the SCP Foundation got in contact with her after she was seen creating a huge social media conspiracy about the fact that her former boss had been transformed into a snake. The anaconda was soon located and transferred to Site-64. Several interview sessions with the snake found an animal humbled by her time in a cage. After a couple of hours of negotiating with the senior researchers, She was able to agree on a deal where she would be used as part of a promotional campaign for charities against the mistreatment of animals. She would attend filming days and perform on camera to show the abuse that animals went through in testing facilities. The general public believes that the footage is computer-generated, and a VFX house has been credited in the adverts. Meanwhile, the Amazon rainforest has one new occupant, a colossal snake that is kind to humans and has a strange addiction to iced coffee. The night watchman's hand shakes, shuddering the beam from his flashlight. He can't believe his eyes. Never in all his time on the job has he ever expected to see something like this. It can't be real. It all begins earlier that night. The newly hired watchman arrives at the site of his new position, guarding a Chuck E. Cheese after dark. It seems a bit excessive, even he thinks so. After all, it's just a restaurant with some arcade games and admittedly creepy animatronic entertainment. Why would it need a dedicated person to keep an eye on it overnight? Sitting down in the security office, he sips his coffee in front of the old TV monitors. Grainy footage from all the building's security cameras flickers on screen. He stares at the display, but doesn't really see it. The night watchman's eyes glaze over. He's already bored. In his boredom, his mind starts to wander. He thinks back to the wanted advertisement for this posting. It had mentioned several reports of movement late at night within the restaurant. None of it made much sense to him. Who'd want to break into a children's restaurant in the middle of the night? Probably just some teenagers, he thinks. Suddenly, a loud noise startles the night watchman. The sound of something metal clattering to the floor. It's coming from the kitchen. Someone's still here. He grabs his flashlight from his belt and rushes through the restaurant, leaving just before a shadowy figure passes one of the security cameras. The night watchman clicks on the flashlight and starts to search, the light from it casting creepy shadows as it falls over the various robotic animals. They give him chills just to look at them. He can't imagine that kids ever enjoy seeing the characters flap their mouths to weird, annoyingly catchy songs. Another noise, footsteps this time. He turns towards the back of the restaurant, the kitchen, where greasy, unhealthy junk food is prepared for hordes of screaming, rowdy children. Stepping out of the dark but brightly decorated main restaurant area into the kitchen, with all its stainless steel work surfaces, was like suddenly arriving on another planet. Instantly, his flashlight falls over what had caused the first sound. A trash can, toppled over to allow someone to rummage around inside. There's a trail of garbage, and the night watchman follows it. It leads him around the parts of the building reserved for employees, only to veer back out towards the restaurant. The more he follows, the closer he gets to the play area, a brightly colored foam pen, where overly energetic kids can run around freely, giving their parents a momentary break as they burn off all the sugar and calories from the low-quality food. But as he approaches the ball pit, he sees it. It's like an occult ritual, a circle of almost 20 children, hurling slices of half-eaten Chuck E. Cheese pizza into the ball pit. Not one of them notices him, too focused on their strange ritual to even register the light from the flashlight. The night watchman is about to call out, to demand to know what the heck is going on, how they all got in here, and where their parents are. But then, he sees something beneath the plastic balls. Something is stirring, moving in response to the children throwing pizza into the pit. And as it crawls out, the night watchman is met with the sight of something vile lurking in the ball pit. Stumbling upon what looks to be the secret meeting of a bizarre ball pit cult is hardly something that the average night watchman or security guard will ever have to experience. Even one working for an establishment like Chuck E. Cheese, the very worst they might find themselves dealing with is particularly rowdy customers, or the restaurant's animatronic characters getting a little quirky at nighttime. But thanks to the SCP Foundation's investigations into this particular branch of Chuck E. Cheese, they've uncovered exactly what it is about the building that draws such unusual attention. You see, there really is something lurking beneath the ball pit, something now known as SCP-6059. Here at the SCP Foundation, the securing of anomalies is one of the core tenets of the organization. After all, that's what the S in the name stands for. And as such, the Chuck E. Cheese containing SCP-6059 had to be requisitioned. Fortunately, the cover story of the restaurant shutting down after a major health code violation seems to have been a believable ruse. And after all, it's not too far from the truth. You could say that the place does have something of a pest problem. Now that it's no longer a restaurant and arcade, the site serves as a Foundation facility established specifically to research SCP-6059. Following some extensive analysis, researchers have determined what drew the cult-like group of children to the ball pit in the first place.
It isn't an anomalous property of the building itself. There's nothing unique about this former Chuck E. Cheese franchise that causes such abnormal behavior. That all comes from the thing living in the ball pit. SCP-6059 is a particularly unusual creature, and not just to look at, although it's certainly not easy on the eye. In fact, it's been known to turn more than a few researchers' stomachs around the facility. Its amorphous body is around the size of an average human toddler, but if you were expecting it to resemble anything made of flesh and blood, then well, you might be disappointed and possibly put off your food. Structurally, the creature is comprised of a mixture of discarded and stomach-churning substances, primarily pizza sauce and plastic, along with various other waste materials. The plastic component is visible in the form of 2 of the plastic balls from the ball pit where it resides, placed on top of SCP-6059's blob-like head. Each one of those 2 plastic balls sports a hand-drawn pupil to resemble the creature's eyes, although no one is quite sure if SCP-6059 can actually see out of these or if they're more for show. Despite the strange and unnerving state it was found in, and being generally pretty unsettling to look at, SCP-6059 doesn't seem to be a violent anomaly. While not outwardly aggressive, it certainly doesn't reach the same levels of friendliness as other amorphous SCPs, such as the well-known and much-adored SCP-999, the Tickle Monster. But fortunately, especially for those researching it, SCP-6059 has come pre-contained for the SCP Foundation's convenience. What does that mean? Well, while it's not unheard of, not all anomalies come with their own containment cell. No, really, we aren't joking. SCP-6059 can't leave the ball pit. Despite the only thing separating it from freedom being a fence of thin, mesh netting and a pool of plastic balls that is only knee-deep, SCP-6059 is trapped. Although that hasn't stopped the creature from claiming it is fully capable of escape. That's right, SCP-6059 can speak too, and it has something of a high opinion of itself as well. Something that SCP Foundation researcher Dr. Zacharias Rosemary has discovered through extensive meetings with the beast of the ball pit. Dr. Rosemary is sent to the Chuck E. Cheese facility housing SCP-6059 at the behest of the Department of Anomalous Ambassadors. This is a specialized research division within the SCP Foundation that intends to improve the direct communication between personnel and anomalies themselves. And what branch would be better suited for learning just why SCP-6059 had its own following of devoted cultists when it was first discovered? Stepping inside the room containing the ball pit, Dr. Rosemary approaches the net barrier between him and the creature within. As per the instructions he has been given only moments before, Zacharias carefully opens the entrance, sealed with nothing more than a simple zipper. Dragging it down, he slips through and stands surrounded by plastic balls, reaching up to his knees. He calls out, knowing the anomaly can hear him, trying to get it to emerge and engage in a conversation with him. Sure enough, only a few meters away, the plastic balls of the pit shuffle and then part as SCP-6059 pops its amorphous head out from below. It greets Dr. Rosemary in an enthusiastic, almost accusatory way, demanding to know the answer to a strange question.
Thing in my pit. Are you balls?
Of course, being a human being and not comprised of plastic balls, Dr. Rosemary has no choice but to answer the creature truthfully. But this doesn't go down well with SCP-6059. The creature immediately becomes highly agitated, shouting at the researcher to get out and leave. To emphasize its distress, SCP-6059 even starts gathering the plastic balls from around it and hurls them directly at Zacharias. If you've ever had a plastic ball from a ball pit thrown at you, then you know that it's hardly a pleasant experience. Although those balls are only lightweight, with enough force behind one, they can certainly pack a punch. Dr. Rosemary makes his hasty retreat from the barrage of plastic balls back beyond the safety of the net fence. Once he's out of range, the formless, messy face of SCP-6059 seems to frown before it disappears beneath the surface of the balls once again. Several other researchers and other personnel from around the site make their own attempts to converse with SCP-6059, met with the same reaction. It clearly doesn't feel like talking. But now that he knows the reaction wasn't unique to him, Dr. Rosemary is reassigned to try and get through to SCP-6059 again. This time, however, he's come prepared. Based on their brief encounter, the anomalous being seems to be childlike in its temperament and prone to misbehaving. So Zacharias has devised a plan for his next interviews. If SCP-6059 starts acting out again, then the researcher intends to treat it like he would a disobedient child, by putting the creature in a timeout. Heading back to the ball pit for a second attempt, Dr. Rosemary is also armed this time around. Well, with a family-sized Chuck E. Cheese pizza, at least. And it's not exactly a weapon, more of a peace offering to appease SCP-6059. Or a sacrifice. Passing through the mesh netting into the ball pit, Dr. Rosemary holds the box just above the surface. Almost immediately, SCP-6059 bursts out and chomps down on the pizza box, yanking the whole thing back down beneath the plastic balls to devour it. Zacharias tries to encourage it to talk again, and SCP-6059 makes no secret that it approves.
You have appeased me with a sacrifice. You may speak, non-ball.
Straight away, Dr. Rosemary wants to get down to business and asks the creature outright what it is, but the response is far from a coherent answer.
Tell me, mortal, have you ever had an enlightened experience in a pit?
Confused by what it means, the Foundation researcher tries to ask for clarity, but SCP-6059 has little to offer in that department. It seems obsessed with the contents of the ball pit, referring to the divine, higher power of the balls. Baffled and struggling to answer, Dr. Rosemary recounts an instance from his childhood where he got sick after playing in a similar pit in a McDonald's. This seems to be what the creature wanted to hear, judging by its response of,
Yes, this is it. You have been touched by my blessing. You are a prophet of the pit.
The anomaly apparently implies that it is some kind of deity, or at least it thinks that it is, capable of bestowing a divine blessing in the form of illness, which seems appropriate since SCP-6059 looks like it's riddled with germs. But Zacharias points out that the creature hasn't exactly answered his question. Hearing this, SCP-6059 seems a little confused, then pauses for a moment before hurling more balls at Dr. Rosemary and shouting again. He goes to leave the pit and warns SCP-6059 that if it doesn't behave itself, then he'll put it in a timeout. It responds by launching another ball and hitting the researcher right between the eyes. That settles it. The anomaly has earned itself a timeout. Putting his new plan into action, Dr. Rosemary shuts off the lights and leaves the room. SCP-6059 doesn't like it one bit, angrily throwing more balls at the mesh every few minutes, demanding that the lights be turned back on and that it be released from timeout. After a few short moments, it seems to settle and looks around in the dark for any sign of the researcher or any other members of personnel.
Please come back.
Now that he's shown the creature what the consequence is for bad behavior, Dr. Rosemary returns to the ball pit and sets out very clearly his expectations. It's very simple. As long as SCP-6059 behaves and cooperates, it'll receive pizza as a sacrifice. If not, should it decide to misbehave and act in a disruptive or disobedient way, then it will get put back in timeout. And surprisingly, the unruly anomaly agrees to adhere to these rules going forward. Their next interview begins much the same as the previous one, with Dr. Rosemary bringing another pizza for SCP-6059 to gobble up. He asks if the creature is ready to behave, to which it nods. Trying to be as amicable as possible, Dr. Rosemary explains that they got off on the wrong foot and that they're going to start over. He tells SCP-6059 to just answer his questions honestly, and the anomaly agrees to his terms. Then, the researcher asks again, wanting to know exactly what SCP-6059 is.
I am Bachulai, god of the pit. I hold divine power over the pit and all within.
This hardly explains much, apart from confirming that SCP-6059 does think that it is some kind of god. Dr. Rosemary presses it for more information, and the creature responds by describing the pit and its many balls as its domain that SCP-6059 oversees. It implies that the ball pit can bestow blessings of some description, but the Foundation has confirmed that it's just an ordinary ball pit. Next, Zacharias decides to ask if Bachulai, SCP-6059, is the god of all ball pits or just this one, and comments that the creature hasn't made much attempt to try and escape its confinement. SCP-6059 seems to take this personally, insisting that it is more than capable of leaving the pit due to being all-powerful. Dr. Rosemary challenges it to do just that, to which SCP-6059 responds by reaching for one of the plastic balls. He urges the creature to make smart choices. Putting the ball back, it confirms that its domain is just the one ball pit it currently resides in. Dr. Rosemary pushes for more information, although SCP-6059 is reluctant to give answers. It needs some gentle encouragement, shying away when asked why this specific ball pit. But eventually, Zacharias coaxes answers out of the creature. It says it just woke up there one day. It came into being within the filth and waste lurking at the bottom of its pit. Then, Dr. Rosemary asked about the children. You see, SCP-6059 is the reason the strange cult-like group had gathered in the ball pit. It has the ability to spread some kind of influence that makes anyone under the age of 10 start to worship it. This usually occurs after around 20 minutes of being near SCP-6059 and leads to those affected to form a circle around the creature while praising its might and power, as well as throwing slices of Chuck E. Cheese pizza into the ball pit as sacrifices to SCP-6059.
My divine servants, loyal subjects who sung my praises and brought me offerings. A god is nothing without followers. Followers spread word of your power and gain you influence. With followers, worshippers, you are remembered as mighty in the pantheon. With worshippers, you gain offerings, and you live forever.
When Dr. Rosemary asks why children, the anomaly describes feeling a kinship with them. It's not hard to see why, given the creature's tendency to misbehave and overestimation of its own importance. Seeing Zacharias taking notes, SCP-6059 asks if the doctor has become one of his supposed followers. After all, Dr. Rosemary has brought offerings of pizza and seems to be writing down stories about SCP-6059.
I do not feel my influence working upon you, yet you perform the steps of worship regardless. Have you accepted the glory of the balls? Have you decided to become a follower of mine?
Of course, Zacharias is just making notes of their interaction in the interest of research. He warns SCP-6059 not to overthink it before wrapping up the interview, once again leaving SCP-6059 alone in the ball pit. The security cameras observing the creature's chamber record it becoming irritable at being left alone. It throws more balls at the mesh for several hours in an attempt to get someone to pay it attention.
Come back.
Then, it sinks back beneath the plastic balls. The very next day, there is a significant difference in the following interaction between SCP-6059 and Dr. Rosemary. The creature actively requests to speak with the researcher. It wants to talk. Or maybe it wants the company, but can't quite articulate it. Agreeing to return to the ball pit as per SCP-6059's requests, although assuming the creature might just be wasting his time for attention, Dr. Rosemary is greeted with a confession. The anomaly explains it has been greatly bothered since their most recent meeting. SCP-6059 explains that previously, it has been content with its domain, not wanting for anything other than the pit and the balls within. It was content, and had managed to garner a small cult of worshipping followers, but now, it feels as if something is wrong. SCP-6059 continues, describing the time when it first awoke in the pit. Back then, SCP-6059 has a feeling, a need for something. But it doesn't know what, and there is nothing it can do to stop this strange, unfamiliar feeling. All the newly congealed amorphous creature knows is that it is a divine deity. Around it is the ball pit, its domain. Eventually, the anomaly meets the children, and thanks to its influence, they begin to worship it. And it's their kindness and sacrifices that make SCP-6059 feel important. But once its followers are gone, and SCP-6059 is found by the Foundation, that same negative feeling returns, until it meets Dr. Rosemary. As the creature continues to explain, it describes how upset it feels to be left alone in the pit, and that speaking with Zacharias can alleviate that feeling. Then, when the researcher leaves, the feeling comes back. It confuses and upsets a bewildered SCP-6059, but offers some words of comfort and even another pizza. Dr. Rosemary explains that it's his job to take care of SCP-6059 and ensure the creature is okay. The anomalous blob rightly points out that he didn't have to come this time. After all, he could have ignored SCP-6059's request to talk. It wasn't required by the Foundation that Dr. Rosemary conduct an interview today. Zacharias puts it in simple terms that SCP-6059 can understand. He agreed to talk not because he has to, but to ensure the creature is all right and to learn more about it, but mostly because he understands SCP-6059 just needs a friend. To begin, SCP-6059 is unfamiliar with the concept. It's never had a friend before, only those that worship it because of its anomalous influence. Over time, the creature seems to have developed a sense of self-superiority because of this, believing itself to be a god. But Dr. Rosemary explains that a friend cares about someone not out of a need to worship them, but instead out of respect. Friends offer support or food or gifts to a friend in need, not out of obligation, but because it is the right thing to do. Zacharias tells SCP-6059 that friends listen to and care about each other not because they have to, but because they can.
Are you my friend, Doctor?
Naturally, Dr. Rosemary agrees, as long as that is something that SCP-6059 wants. In response, the creature playfully throws a plastic ball between the doctor's eyes.
Grasping clawed hands, slimy tentacles, skeletal fists, all reaching out from the dark to claim you. Is this the monster in the closet, the beast under the bed, or the horrors inside a simple item of clothing? It's a sunny Saturday afternoon in the early days of summer. The sky is a bright, cloudless blue. The sun beams down on the crowds of kids home from school and adults hoping to get out and soak up a little bit of the cheerful energy. It isn't just the students enjoying the fact that school is out for summer either. Teachers are on vacation too. One particular teacher is enjoying her first day off in months, taking full advantage of the free time. She starts the day with coffee and breakfast, then stops by a local ice cream shop for a strawberry cone and heads to one of her favorite summer pastimes, a yard sale. She follows the signs to a driveway filled with what she just knows will be hidden gems. They say one person's trash is another person's treasure, and she is the person who considers those cast-offs to be undiscovered treasures. She picks through the cardboard boxes of yellowed books, bags of worn stuffed animals, crooked shelves, and wooden rocking chairs with paint peeling off. After picking up the third shoe in a row that doesn't seem to have a matching partner, she's beginning to think that this particular yard sale might be a bust. But then, she spots it, draped over the back of an overstuffed orange couch. It's a coat made from fine, high-quality wool. She doesn't have much need for a wool coat in the summer, but it looks so nice that she can't help but pick it up to get a better look. The material is heavy and sturdy in her hands, smelling faintly of dust the way all true vintage pieces do. She should know. She found the beautiful 50s blue linen dress she's wearing right now under similar circumstances. She shakes out the coat and holds it up to get a better look. It's even better than she first thought. It's a military greatcoat, and it looks a great deal older than it did while slung over the couch. She'd guess that it's several hundred years old, easily. It might be the oldest piece she's ever seen at a yard sale like this. Surely the owners of this house aren't just selling this coat. It must be out here by mistake. A coat like this, with its age and likely link to military history, could be in a museum. She catches the attention of the homeowner, an older woman showing off a chipped tea set, and calls her over. She asks the old woman about the coat, wondering where it came from, how old it is, and most importantly, how much does she want for it. The old woman regards the coat with confusion, insisting that she's never seen it before in her life. It didn't belong to her late husband, her father, her grandfather. She has no idea where it came from. If the younger woman likes it so much, she can just pay $5 for it and call it a day. Thrilled at her good luck, the yard sale enthusiast hands the old lady a crumpled $5 bill and takes her prize. On the walk home, she continues examining the coat. No tag, no label, nothing to indicate when it was made or what army might have used it. She doesn't recognize it from any particular era or nation. Between that and the fact that the old lady at the yard sale claimed she had no idea where it came from, the coat seems to be one big mystery. Depending on the angle she looks at it from, it could be from World War I or it could be from the 1600s. She's a history teacher. She should be able to put her finger on it, but she just can't. When she gets home, she rushes upstairs to her full-length mirror, cranks the air conditioning up. She doesn't want to sweat all over an antique after all, and throws the coat on. Maybe taking a look at the silhouette of the garment on a person, in this case, herself, will help her make a better estimate of the coat's origin. She slides an arm into each sleeve and takes a look. Not too bad. Definitely too heavy for summer, but it's beautifully constructed, and definitely a genuine historical garment. It's going to make an amazing addition to her collection of vintage clothes, and in the winter, she'll be able to stay warm in it on the walk to work. She's just about to remove the coat when she feels someone tap her on the shoulder. She spins around, gasping in shock. Is someone in the house? But when she looks behind her, there's no one there. She calls out to the empty room. Hello? Of course, no one answers, and she kicks herself for acting like the foolish main character in some scary movie. If there's an intruder in the house, they're not just going to answer her. But she can't hear anything, can't see anywhere an intruder might have hidden after tapping her shoulder. She must be imagining things. There's no one here. She reaches for one of the coat sleeves again, and again there's the feeling of someone tapping her on the shoulder. But this time, it doesn't stop. The tapping becomes a hand resting on her shoulder, then pushing past her shoulder and along her arm. She doesn't know how, it should be impossible, but the hand is inside the coat with her. She stares into the mirror, mouth open in shock, as a pale hand pokes out of the armhole, hovering just over her own hand. It wiggles its fingers, as if giving her a friendly wave. Horrified and unable to figure out what else to do, she yanks the coat off and throws it to the floor. What else do you do when your new vintage coat starts waving at you with its own hands? Looking at the coat lying on the floor in a heap, it's hard to believe that something so unusual happened only a second ago. Or did it? That's impossible. It must have been heat exhaustion or her overactive imagination. Against her better judgment, she picks the coat back up and throws it over her shoulders again. No sooner has she tugged the sleeves over her arms than she feels the presence of something else in the coat with her. This time, two hands emerge from the sleeves, waving at her frantically in the mirror. She makes a move to take the coat off again, but one of the hands gives her a thumbs down, as if begging her not to. Well, what else do you do when the strange magical coat from the yard sale tries to communicate with you using hands that appeared from nowhere? You listen. She tries to ask the hands questions, remembering the sign language course she took in college, but they don't seem to understand what she's saying. She asks them if they're the ghost of a fallen soldier haunting the coat. She asks if they can tell her anything about where the coat came from, but all they do is wave. Maybe that's because they don't have eyes. They can't see what she's trying to tell them. Eventually, the hands seem to give up, disappearing back into the lining of the jacket. She's about to take it off again when she feels something slimy slip up her back, emerging from the coat's lining. It wriggles against her spine like a worm before sliding out of the collar and up her cheek. In the mirror, she can see it, though she wishes she couldn't. It's a tentacle, like that of a massive octopus she once saw in an aquarium. It suctions to her cheek, and she can't take it anymore. She needs to get this coat off now. She begins tugging at the sleeves, pulling it off, turning one of the sleeves inside out in the process, and the tentacle takes notice. It wraps itself around her throat, trying to hold her inside of the coat, squeezing tighter and tighter. She thrashes, ripping at the fabric and raking the tentacle with her nails, but it only squeezes tighter and tighter still, cutting off her air supply. Her eyes bulge, her mouth gapes wide, gasping for air as she fights for life. The only way to escape is to get the coat off, but every time she tries, the tentacle only squeezes tighter around her throat. She can feel other hands, some human, some with sharp claws that dig into her skin, some covered in fur, all grabbing hold of her and pulling her back into the coat. The fight between the woman and the coat full of arms pulls her to the floor, where she struggles violently, throwing her body back and forth as she wrestles with the limbs grabbing hold of her. She tries to scream, but can't get enough air into her lungs to make any sound but a pathetic squeak. During the struggle, she winds up with the coat stretched over her head, holding onto her by the neck and two arms. She breaks free, and the coat falls on top of her head like a blanket. And then, suddenly, where there was once a woman and dozens of inhuman hands, there is now just a simple wool coat lying on the ground in an unassuming pile of fabric. She's gone, vanished without a trace. Meanwhile, across town, An old woman with a yard sale sign in her yard gets a visit from a van full of strange men claiming to be members of an elite research organization. They lost something very important and tracked it to her simple small-town yard sale. She gives them the information of the woman who purchased the missing item, but by the time they reach her home, she's gone. No matter, one less witness to wipe the memory of. They collect the coat, pile into their van, and carry it back to the SCP Foundation site it was swiped from. No one is certain how it left containment, but they're relieved to once again have custody of SCP-262. SCP-262 is a light brown European military-style greatcoat. A cursory examination of its style led researchers to estimate its period of origin to be anywhere from the late 1500s to the early 1900s. Narrowing it down to a smaller window has proven difficult. The jacket has no specific markings, tags, or other designations, causing the research staff to theorize that it was an original sample design intended to be pitched to military officials for approval as a new official uniform. Then, it was either lost or rejected, resulting in it never being put into wider use. The coat is made of wool and is cut to fall below the knee on most individuals who wear it. Attempts at carbon dating the fibers of the coat have been inconclusive, and contrary to the apparent visual style of the coat, places the age of the wool at around 6,200 to 6,400 years old. The wool itself is thousands of years old, while the coat was made more recently. Of course, the uncertain age of the coat is far from its only anomalous property. SCP-262 is able to manifest a number of arms from its dark inner lining. Any subject wearing the coat may open it in order to materialize hands and arms from within. These arms are, at least some of the time, under the control of the wearer. These limbs can vary widely in skin tone, length, and strength. Some of the arms observed since the item came into Foundation custody include a reptilian scaled tentacle, approximately 13 feet in length, 4 semi-transparent cellulose appendages over 33 feet long, with 4 fingers, 2 elbow-like joints, and no apparent wrists, the clawed paw of a large predatory cat resembling a cougar or mountain lion, as well as a wide variety of feet and legs that manifest at random. The space within SCP-262's lining is regarded as non-Euclidean in nature, and the coat itself is considered a link to an extra-dimensional space. During initial testing, Subject 402M was asked to put SCP-262 over his head in order to see what would happen. When he did so, the coat promptly fell to the ground in a heap as 402M vanished beneath it. Several months later, fingerprint analysis of an object handled by a human arm that appeared from within the coat identified that arm as belonging to Subject 402M. This incident suggests that some, if not all, of the limbs within the coat belong to beings trapped inside the coat's extra-dimensional space. Wearing the coat in an ordinary manner does not result in the subject disappearing into the space within. Subjects wearing SCP-262 as intended, one arm through each sleeve, the coat across the back, you've presumably worn a coat before and know what I'm describing here, find themselves able to manipulate the arms that emanate from within. The amount of control the subject has over these limbs varies. For instance, Test Subject 301F was able to multitask while blindfolded, navigating her environment in such a way that seemed to indicate some degree of awareness of surroundings on the part of SCP-262. The coat seems to maintain this awareness even when the person wearing it cannot see or hear anything around them. Some members of the research team believe that SCP-262 is fully sentient. They arrived at this conclusion after witnessing SCP-262 playing a piano with 2 or more hands, even though the test subject wearing it had no musical training, defending itself and its subject from multiple attackers, several of the limbs fighting each other or defying the will of the subject. The Foundation first acquired the coat when the administrator relinquished ownership of it in the late 20th century. The administrator, due to his status, is not required to disclose the origins of the coat or what he might have done with it in the past. All he said about the coat upon parting with it was, "In the right hands, it could be extremely useful. In the wrong hands, it could be extremely dangerous. In my hands, it was becoming extremely dusty and moth-ridden and taking up far too much space in my closet." Additional research notes were attached to the SCP-262 file. After perusing these notes, I compiled the most interesting findings for further review. I hope you will find them as thought-provoking as I have. During Trial 7, Subject 722M was instructed to put the coat on properly, then turn the right arm sleeve inside out as he removed his arm from the garment. When he did, a chorus of disembodied voices began to cry out in pain. In spite of this, 722M was ordered to continue inverting the sleeve. At this point, several arms emerged from the lining of SCP-262 and attacked the test subject in apparent self-defense. Subject 722M attempted to retract his arm from the coat, but in the process of doing so, he inverted the sleeve further. This pushed the coat too far, and the long cellulitic arm emerged from the inner lining of the opposite side, reached around, and up through the inverted sleeve, grabbed hold of 722M's hand and gave it a violent yank. The force of this pull was enough to dislocate the subject's shoulder and injure him severely. Once the coat had returned itself to its preferred position, the chorus of voices silenced, and the arms retreated out of sight. Subject 722M was removed from the coat and given medical attention. His current condition is noted as inconsequential. During case study 262-42, SCP-262 was placed on a mannequin. First, SCP-262 was placed on an anatomically correct male mannequin, dressed in attire consistent with an average SCP Foundation personnel. After a few minutes passed, one single human arm stretched out of the inner lining of the coat, reaching up to touch the mannequin's face. It poked and prodded the face curiously a few times, then retreated out of sight, and did not emerge again. The following day, researchers placed SCP-262 over the head and shoulders of another male mannequin. After a few moments, the coat collapsed to the ground, and the entire test mannequin disappeared. An added research note revealed that a wooden arm, resembling that of the test mannequin, was spotted emerging from SCP-262 on several occasions following the trial. This further confirms the hypothesis that the limbs inside of the coat originate from entities that were somehow trapped inside. During case study 262-307, research staff attempted to observe the behavior of SCP-262 when placed on the body of a recently deceased human being. After a Class D personnel was terminated during an experiment with an undisclosed SCP, the body was placed on a chair in a seated position. The coat was then placed on the body. After several moments, a human arm emerged from the lining of SCP-262, reaching toward the corpse's face. It poked at the face a few times before disappearing back into the coat. A few minutes passed, and then the body began to shake violently. A popping and snapping sound could be heard, and the hands, which had been poking out of the sleeves, vanished from view. The body then went still again, and a human hand reached up the back of its neck, coming from the collar, and pulled the head into an upright position. Then, an array of other hands and arms crisscrossed over the chest and abdomen, straightening the body's posture. As the research staff watched, two arms, cellulitic in nature, grabbed the ankles and legs, pulling the body up into a standing position. Even more arms came down each sleeve. The coat's limbs worked as a combined unit to pilot the body, and managed to escape from the observation room and overpower the security stationed outside. SCP-262 continued to pilot the corpse through the Foundation site, attempting to break out. Guided by exceptionally strong limbs, the animated body was able to knock security guards out of the way, even seizing a weapon from one of them, resulting in several casualties. Who knows what might have happened if MTF Epsilon 9, the Fire Eaters, hadn't been in the building at the time. It's possible that SCP-262 might have escaped the facility altogether, making its way into the general population. Using their flame accelerators as aggressively as possible, the MTF members managed to corner SCP-262 at the far side of a hallway. With nowhere to turn, SCP-262 resorted to an emergency escape plan. One of the hands from within the coat pulled the garment up and over the head of the corpse it was piloting. SCP-262 collapsed to the ground, the body vanishing beneath it and leaving the mobile task force without a target. At this point, it is unknown whether this escape attempt was driven by the will of SCP-262 itself or some sort of residual consciousness from the body of the deceased Class D personnel used in the experiment. At this point in time, SCP-262 is under review and additional research to see if it could be useful to field agents attempting to contain other SCPs. At this time, agents are not permitted to use SCP-262 without supervision by a staff member with commander-level authority. Whenever SCP-262 is not in use, it is to be kept in a climate-controlled room at an undisclosed Foundation site, guarded by at least 2 Level 2 security personnel at any given time. It is unlikely that SCP-262 will make its way back into the general population anytime soon, unless it finds itself in possession of a wearer willing to help it get there. Still, if you ever happen to be browsing a thrift shop or yard sale and happen upon a vintage military jacket that entices you to try it on, do so with caution. you might find yourself in need of some help. Though you won't need anyone to lend a hand. You'll have plenty of those. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-674, the exposition gun makes Nintendo real life.